We accept the reality of the world with which we're presented. It's as simple as that.
We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies, Mr. Beale. The world is a business, Mr. Beale.
Go on without me. Just go.
A good soldier never leaves a man behind.
Because I wouldn't give you 2 cents for all your fancy rules if behind them they didn't have a little bit of plain, ordinary, everyday kindness.
Life, finds a way.
Welcome to Silver Screen Biases. Each week we pick a movie off of IMDb's Top 250 and dig into it. We're examining truth claims in critically acclaimed movies while also examining our own biases. I'm Nelson.
This is Jeff.
And this week we're joined by a returning guest,
Connor.
I don't know why that shouldn't have been funny.
But it was hilarious.
Probably wasn't to our listeners either.
I've had it for 31 years.
It's been funny the whole time. Connor, you are...
Take a breath.
English, please.
Connor, you were with us last... And Jeff,
Gosh, what happened?
Go, Jeff, go.
Connor, you were first with us with the movie Full Metal Jacket, Stanley Kubrick.
Correct.
Which wasn't that long ago. And so we just kind of refreshing, just have your political biases changed? Has anything changed within your religious biases? Or cinematically, have you discovered any movies or new things about yourself when it comes to the big screen that's changed since the last time we've interacted?
So I would say politically, I'm pretty much the same as where I was before. Soft libertarian, not on the same level as Nelson over here. For some reason, over the past 6 months or so, I have started to very much despise how much I'm being taxed.
Yep.
But
And you get taxed less than we do.
yeah, other than that, I would say no, that hasn't changed. Religious bias, pretty much the same as where I was before. Don't currently go to church or anything like that. Went to church my entire life growing up. Don't have any problem with it. It's just organized religion in general that I have issues with.
For disorganized religion.
Yeah, that's correct. I think you made that joke last time.
I probably did. It's a good joke. I stand by it.
And then as far as movies go, I think last time I kind of blanked on what my favorite movies were. I was a little starstruck by you two.
I get it.
We get that.
So I would say now, after having thought about it, one of my favorite movies of all time is Remember the Titans.
Yes, it's a great one.
I was reminded of that. Where I work, we have a TV that we always play movies.
Where do you work?
I work at a clinic for the Army. In case you wanted that background. Still a sergeant in the Army.
Okay, you haven't been promoted or demoted?
No.
Transmoted?
But since you were on the episode last, you've actually changed location.
I have. Now, I used to live in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Now I live in Fort Carson, Colorado. So a little bit further away.
Space Force, huh?
Yeah, we have a lot of Space Force around us, though. But, no, sorry. Remember the Titans. One of my favorites. Another one of my favorite movies, it's one of those movies that if it's on TV and I'm flipping through the channels and I stop on it, no matter where it is, I'm watching it, is Back to the Future Part 1. Yeah. Specifically Part 1.
It's on the top 250.
Part 2 is great. And Part 3
the third one's the
is
Western
just
one, right?
Weird.
Yeah. That's weird, yeah.
But Part 1 is my favorite Back to the Future. So that one, and then I'm a huge Harry Potter nerd.
Yeah.
So I will watch all of those movies. I reread the books like once a year.
Yeah, no, they're John Williams, who did the soundtrack for Saving Private Ryan. Mm-hmm. He's connected to Harry Potter movies.
Brother of Hank Williams.
Yep. Nope. But yeah, I will say, Remember the Titans. So that movie came out during my childhood. I'm a little older than you, Connor, not by much. But that movie came out. And
I'm also a little older.
I had the biggest crush on Hayden Panettiere.
In that movie?
Yeah.
Well, because I was the same age as her. I had.
Okay.
She kept it together.
So, and here's the reason why. For all the listeners out there that want to send me birthday gifts, my birthday is August 20th, 1989. She was born August 21st, 1989. And my whole ideal was she wants an older guy. I'm that guy.
Yeah.
So my whole growing up, because then she did some Disney Channel stuff. Like I followed her career very heavily until she did the Nashville show, and then she lost me with country music. But
she was the cheerleader. That's where I first.
Yeah, she
went
for, save the cheerleader.
Heroes,
Save the world.
I actually never saw Heroes. She did. I
So you
watched
followed her career pretty closely then.
very closely, except for the stuff that I probably would like the most. Yeah,
Did you see the Bring It On movie she was in?
I did. I
Okay.
did. I watched all the Bring It
Of course you
Ons.
did.
Those are great movies. Great classic. Great
Art house
movies.
films.
Top
Yeah.
250, I think.
Beautiful movies. But yeah, no, Hayden Panettiere. She was like my first childhood crush.
Is that's not how you pronounce that, is it?
Panettiere?
I thought it was Panettiere.
No, you're thinking of the Dimebag Darrell band.
Pantera.
That was a joke, yeah.
Pantera bread?
Yeah, Pantera. Anyway,
Doesn't
but yeah.
matter.
No, yeah, no, that's a great movie. Are you a big sports guy, Connor? So do you like it because of the premise, or are you a football guy in general? Like you just like football?
No, I love football.
Okay,
He's just really big into movies with racial discrimination.
That too.
which is why we're talking
It's
about
my
Saving
kink.
Private Ryan today. It's like
Also, homophobia and fat shaming.
That's not true.
sunshine.
For what?
What do you mean?
No, Connie, don't give him ground. Nelson's trying to get you.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, he's being,
Sunshine.
he's being
Hey, man.
He's not gay.
Okay.
Sunshine wasn't gay. He was the equivocal ladies' man.
No,
He
Sunshine.
was the
Sunshine-
Sunshine was definitely gay in that movie. He kisses Gary in the locker room.
Yeah, as a joke.
No.
Wait, hold on.
What a classic
Sunshine.
prank.
Hold on.
Sunshine's from California.
Right.
Yeah.
He
And
was a hippie.
and all men from California with long
He was
hair.
a hippie
No,
that
he was
did
gay.
yoga.
No, he's gay in that movie.
But they never came out and acknowledged that, did they?
No, they did.
did.
And they made fun, like there was homophobia in the movie. Like it was a subplot of the film.
Well, it's the 1960s.
Yeah.
It's
I
not
think-
really a subplot.
I think
They accept him for who he is because he's their teammate.
I completely missed the fact.
What did they get past quicker? That he was gay or that some of them were black?
They definitely got past the gayness
Way faster.
way faster.
And then what's his name? He's in My Name Is Earl. He's in Butterfly Effect.
All right,
Lost
hold
a
on.
ton
We
of-
have to talk
ton of
about
weight.
this. We have to talk
Oh.
about this because this
And he's
will
a mountain of a man. in that.
Yeah.
this will wreck
Plays
my
the lineman.
childhood. I looked up is the character Sunshine gay, and this article says they did not directly confirm his sexuality, just alluded to him being a little like hippie, like just not loose with his body, but just like a little bit chaotic.
In the locker room,
Yeah.
he goes up to Gary and says, "I think you know what I want," and then leans in and kisses him.
and laughs and jokes about it.
No,
Like,
he
it was
doesn't.
never- it was,
He doesn't laugh about it. He gets pushed away.
No, Jeff, the person laughing was you, and you were laughing nervously.
No. Okay, I need to rewatch this movie then because like I interpreted. I remember the scenes exactly. I interpret them differently than if I completely miss it. The fact that they're just setting him up to be attracted.
This is a
I
show
thought-
about your
'cause
truth.
Here's the
so
thing, right? I kissed guys back in in high school as a joke. I would kiss a guy on the cheek in high school just to make them freak out. I'll say it like
this
like,
wasn't a
that's
kiss on
how
the
I
cheek,
interpret
though.
it.
In his high school yearbook, Jeff was
Oh.
labeled most likely to be gay.
Everyone signed my yearbook Sunshine. Man. Anyways, I gotta watch this movie tonight. Now.
What is other than those movies? Everything else with me is pretty much the same.
Okay,
Still doing my job as a medic in the Army, just in a different location.
got you right on. Are you liking it out west?
Yeah, it's beautiful out there.
Nice.
It's definitely a different feeling than North Carolina. That's for sure.
Are you with any of the same people you were with at Fort Bragg?
No, completely.
Okay, you were the only one that moved.
Well, there was a friend of mine that also moved to Colorado around the same time as me. We worked together in North Carolina, but he's in a completely different company, completely different brigade.
Okay.
So
Okay. Well, there you go. That's the update on Connor. Nelson, any updates for you since our last episode?
Got a new bed and a new van.
Hey, moving on.
I saw both of those today.
You saw Nelson's
I
bed
I
today?
took
I
Connor
did see.
for a ride in both. Sunshine.
Gosh. Strong side. We want to get into the movie?
Backside. What?
You're ridiculous. Saving Private Ryan, 1998. This movie runs approximately 2 hours and 49 minutes. Directed by the Steven
Spielberg.
Spielberg.
There's probably more than one.
Spielberg, could be. Rated R for pirates.
I'll cut that out.
What's wrong with you?
I don't know. I'm in rare form.
I would say your form looks just about the same. We're off to a great start. Before I get into the notable cast, which there is many, it's 8.6 out of 10 on the IMDb. It currently stands at number 26 on the top 250. The Rotten Tomatoes tomato meter is 94% and 95% with the audience. So high marks all around. The notable cast in this is quite big. We got Tom Hanks, Tom Sizemore, Edward Burns, Adam Goldberg, Vin Diesel, which I did not pick up in the movie. We'll get to that in a second. Giovanni Ribisi, Jeremy Davies from Lost, if any of our Lost fans are out there. Matt Damon, who is Mr. Ryan. Ted Danson.
One of the Mr. Ryan.
That's true. There were, yeah. Paul Giamatti, Bryan Cranston, and music by John Williams. This movie has a huge stacked support system with it. All right, gentlemen. First time with this movie?
Hold on.
What did I miss?
Debuted on the top 250 at 4th. That's also the highest it's been. By January of 2006, it had fallen down to 68 and then rallied back up to where it is now at 26.
Any of you guys seen?
Cost $70 million to
there
make.
It is. Yeah, the budget. Tell us.
In 1998, there's been. Connor, take a stab at it. What percent inflation do you think there's been since 1998?
Nelson loves people guessing this number.
Since 98?
Yeah.
95.
You went high. Jeff?
I'm going to say 25. One for every
Way too
year.
low. 87% inflation. So this movie, adjusted for inflation, was $131 million to produce.
Okay. Anyone, have you guys, this is the first time watching it?
First time watching it. No, that's not true. Wait.
Nelson, do you know what we're doing today?
What's this show? I've started this once before, and I did not get past the opening scene.
The cemetery scene with the old man?
I did not
that
get
was
past.
also hard.
I did not get past D-Day.
Yeah. Not many people did.
In fact,
That's not true.
that's not true. We'll get into those numbers here in a minute. But I always thought this was a Pacific Theater movie. I didn't realize this was D-Day. I always thought that this was invasion of Japan.
The Pacific Theater thing is the first time I've ever heard that reference. You said it earlier today, Nelson, when you were playing with your bed. That just means taking place on the Asian coast versus here on.
Yeah, in World War II, U.S. fought in the Pacific Theater and the Western Theater, also called the European Theater.
Yeah, I never
North African
never heard
campaign.
the theater aspect.
The North African campaign, but they don't refer to it as the North African Theater.
Yeah, they weren't as theatrical.
Yeah. The costumes weren't. They had a lower budget for costumes.
Yeah. Wow. This is
Inspired by books written by Stephen E. Ambrose.
Who also wrote Band of Brothers.
Yes.
I have one line here I want to get into because it goes to a question that we've started asking. Before we get into the huge biases, I do, and we'll come back to this, but just as we're on the topical stuff.
I didn't get to answer the last question.
Oh, hell yeah. Well,
Connor, have you seen this movie?
I didn't answer it either. Connor, what did you think? Have you seen this before?
I have seen this movie many times.
Okay.
This is absolutely not the first time. Probably close to the 15th or 16th time I've seen this movie.
Is this like your favorite movie? I don't think I've.
No, not my favorite movie.
Remember the Titans is his favorite movie. We just talked about this.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
remember
true.
that.
No, growing up, my father was big into World War II or military memorabilia in general, and he really wanted to theme our basement. He finished the entire basement in our
live mines, bayonets in the wall.
That's right. When you walk down into our basement, he turned it into like a 1940s theater type area, and there was.
I'm sorry, I'll stop. Go ahead.
There was all kinds of war memorabilia like on the walls, and he had all kinds of things that he went to auctions and bought, uniforms and stuff, pictures, all kinds of things he'd put on the wall. And right when you went down the stairs, the wall right in front of you at the bottom of the stairs was a Saving Private Ryan movie poster framed on the wall that is still there to this day. I actually saw it yesterday when I went down into the basement of his house. Still there. So every time I would go down, my room was in the basement. Every time I go down to my room, I would see this poster. And so it was one of those movies that if it was on TV or if my dad was watching it or whatever, I would just sit there and watch it with him because it's one of his favorites. So definitely not the first time I've seen this.
This was my first time, front to back. I had seen the opening scene many times. I don't know why. I wasn't seeking it out, but the opening D-Day setting is. I'd seen. There's a lot of the scenarios that like the canteen getting blown up and like the contents spilling out. Like the guy that gets shot in the helmet takes the helmet off and like is grateful and then gets pegged in the head. Like I'd seen all those scenes before, but never knew what the movie was out beyond that part. I actually didn't know who Ryan was in the movie. This was essentially my first time through, but the whole D-Day scenario I had seen multiple times. I don't know why, but yeah. So this was my first time. I don't think I knew John Williams did the music to it either, so that was nice. We talk about, do they say the name of the movie inside the bit, and they do. I've got that quote here real quick. Sergeant Horvath, he says this: "I don't know. Part of me thinks the kid's right. He asks what he's done to deserve this. He wants to stay here, fine. Let's have him and let's leave him and go home. But then another part of me thinks, what if by some miracle we stay, then actually make it out of here? Someday we might look back on this and decide that saving Private Ryan was the one decent thing we were able to pull out of this whole god-awful, crappy mess." I edited myself. "Look," you said, "Captain, maybe we do that. We all earn the right to go home." So they said the thing.
They said the thing.
They said the thing. We'll come back to that quote later, but I did. This was one of the quotes that I picked up while watching the movie.
Yeah.
And then I also was like, oh, I gotta remember because they
said the thing.
They also said the name. So yeah. But I think that's the last little topical thing that we talk about beforehand. But yeah. Did you guys? I mean, so Connor, you obviously enjoy this movie. Nelson, did you enjoy it? Was it? Well, I guess I don't want to speak. Do you enjoy it? I mean, I'm making an assumption, but do you like this movie, or do you just like
No, I think
watching it?
I think it's a fantastic movie. I do think that there are some scenes, including the D-Day scene, that are incredibly hard to watch, especially as an adult.
Yeah.
And understanding the context. Because the first time I saw this, I was a teenager, probably like 14, 15. And it didn't have the same impact. But I still enjoy the movie. I think it's a fantastic movie.
Yeah.
Do you think the impact that it has on you now is a function of you being an adult or you being a military medic?
Probably more an adult.
Okay.
I don't think being a medic has much I think being a medic and seeing the scenes of the medics helping the soldiers out on the beach, I am critical of the things that they're doing, but I'm also like kind of more focused on that. It doesn't really affect me on like an emotional level though.
Sure.
I was easily comparing the opening D-Day scene and some of the other actual battle scenes in the movie to like Call of Duty or other military video games. I'm not a video game guy. I never was back in the day. But like the thought occurred to me as I was watching this. I was like, because those scenes were for me were very hard to watch. I enjoyed the movie overall. Like I think it's a very powerful movie. But like I agree, like it's not an easy watch. And watching those scenes was very squeamish and stuff. The thought popped in my head. I was like, I wonder if people who play video games, those shooting military Call of Duty games, I wonder if this movie is. I wonder if they have the same reaction as I was having in that moment watching this, or if they're just like, huh, I'm clearly like, I know desensitizing happens. I just don't know, like if that happens to some people, if some people can watch this and just move on without having it kind of impact them a little bit, you know?
I mean, just as a personal anecdote, when I was like 9 years old or something like that, there was a video game that came out called Medal of Honor Frontline.
Yes, I played that one. Yeah.
They're the PlayStation 2 or whatever. Yep. And the opening scene to that game that you're playing through is essentially the same as the opening scene to Saving Private Ryan. You get off the landing vehicle, you're storming the beach, you try and take a bunker at the end.
Is it as grisly?
I mean, it
probably was at the time.
At the time, for a video game at the time, I'm sure. It even like to the point where they're putting the Bangalore under the barbed wire and blowing it up so that you can get up the beach. Mm-hmm. Like it's essentially the same thing. So I played that first, and then I saw Saving Private Ryan when I was a little bit older. Yeah. And to me, I saw it and went, that's the same thing that I played in this video game. It didn't have the same impact as a kid. So I would say there's probably a little bit of desensitization with it. I
appreciate movies like this, and in other genres as well too, not just specific military, but like that make people aware of some of the realities of these situations. Like, it's like I appreciate it for that fact. But in that same light, whether it's a movie or a video game, or even sometimes books, reading novelizations of historical accounts, can kind of normalize things that we're not able to fully grasp. And for me, at least, like sometimes like I won't fully grasp the depth of things that I'm observing versus what actually happened. And sometimes it removes some nuances to the depth of it. And I kind of had a struggle with that. I was like, I wonder if like I'd have a different opinion about this if I played video games more often. Like if this would just, because like the opening scene was hard. That was a hard scene to get through.
And fun fact, I'm obviously not a fun subject, but fun fact, the Medal of Honor game series was started by Steven Spielberg after he did Saving Private Ryan. That's
Really?
why that scene is
Pretty much scene for scene.
pretty much the same.
I didn't
Frontline
know
isn't
that.
the first game in the Medal of Honor series. I think it's the first one that Steven Spielberg wasn't actually a part of, but he did start, I think, DreamWorks Games or something like that, and they teamed up with EA and somebody else, and they made those games. So that's his project.
Medal of Honor came out in 99.
Yep.
So the first one came out a year after the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Then there was Underground in 2000. They essentially did a game every 2 years.
But yeah, that's Steven Spielberg's game series that he started.
That's fascinating. Huh. That is a fun fact.
I would say a lot of the gore in the first in that beach scene didn't impact me in the way that like it probably was intended to. I mean, like it made me angry at the waste of human life and just the total lack of economy of human life here.
Yeah.
Especially the line 5 men is an opportunity, 1 man is a waste of ammo. Like they're now like valuing each piece of ammo greater than the man that's carrying it. But I was blown away at like the practical effects. I was like, wow, how'd they do that? How'd they do that? That's what impacted me more. And I was more like super impressed.
It was really well done in
Yeah.
a positive way. Yeah.
I have a question for you, though.
Sure.
So, obviously, people dying is a horrible thing, especially in war. What would you have done differently for Operation Overlord to try and mitigate that loss of life? Because this was the best option the Allies had for an invasion of mainland Europe.
Yeah, and also we were watching not footage, but a recreation of Omaha Beach, which had the most casualties. 4 of the 5 beaches had casualty losses and 70 to 90% success rate. So, like, if you land on the beach, 70 to 90% chance that you survived day 1 of D-Day. But on Omaha, it was 50%. Flip a coin, live or die. I don't think the U.S. should have been in World War II.
Was this post Pearl Harbor?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not as familiar with the timeline and stuff. So, and we watched the A-bomb movie as well too.
Oppenheimer,
this week.
yeah.
Oppenheimer. We watched this week too. So, my timeline's a little wacky, but okay. So even after Japan attacked us, you don't think America should?
Well, he's going to point out the fact that the U.S. essentially knew that Japan was going to do that and kind of let it happen as an excuse to join the war.
Sure did.
And this is documented.
There's sufficient evidence that
So there's document.
I don't know much about this. I just know what he's going to say.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I mean, so FDR campaigned for his election on the promise that we would not be going into World War II. There was a lot of political pressure, and we know from writings and other documentation that he was actually interested in joining World War II, at least after he entered office. It's entirely possible that he sincerely meant it while campaigning. I don't think he did. And then, interestingly, some might say, some of the more valuable transportation that usually would be docked at Pearl Harbor was absent from Pearl Harbor, was out on training the day that they were attacked. There is, I think, declassified documents showing that intelligence had more than reason to suspect, but like confirmed knowledge that Japan would be attacking Pearl Harbor. And then, of course, there is the classic saying, when goods don't cross border, troops do. So a lot of what we saw leading into World War I and II, we're doing with Ukraine right now, where we are saying, we're not in this war, but providing a lot of support to one side and embargoing the other side. That's taking a side in a war. it looks like from the evidence that FDR very much wanted to be at war with along with the Allies. If the U.S. had not gotten involved in World War II, there's sufficient evidence to suggest that the Soviet Union would have finished the job on their own and would have actually been weaker than if we'd helped them. So in a lot of ways, it worked against us.
But would they have done it as fast?
They wouldn't have had to make a land invasion because they were already on land, so we wouldn't have needed a D-Day.
But then the Germans could have put all of their resources on the Western Front.
True.
Which is why the Eastern Front, which is why the Western Front was weakened.
Yeah.
And why we were able to invade mainland Europe.
I do want to point out that I respect the fact that neither of you pointed out, but what about the Holocaust?
I was about to bring it up.
Well, okay. We didn't know about the Holocaust yet.
Right.
Right? And so I do feel like that while the Holocaust is a huge tragedy, when people use that as a reason why we had to get involved in World War II, it had nothing to do with us getting involved in World War II. We didn't know about it.
What do you mean we didn't know about it? We didn't know there were concentration camps or armies invading Jewish communities?
No.
We did know that they were starting to round up the Jewish people and taking them away.
Yeah, and it was believed that they were being deported. In fact, there were ships of Jews sent to America, and we turned them away. We said, nope, can't stay here.
I find it hard to believe we didn't know that was happening. Granted, I wasn't there. None of us were there. But like, I find it as of all the things, like of all the political power and all the strings that they pulled to be involved or not involved, I find it hard that they did not know what was going on.
People in Germany didn't know.
A lot of them did, and they kept quiet.
We don't know that. So that's a big assumption.
There are people there is reason to believe that there were people in Germany that weren't aware of certainly of the scale. Now, you could argue that those in government in America knew, and we just don't have that information declassified. But as far as what we know they knew, America didn't know about the Holocaust.
But we did know the rhetoric around...
We knew the rhetoric, yes.
The German
We
Reich.
knew that they were being rounded up into concentration camps and deported. We didn't know that there was extermination camps. And there is a distinction there to be made. Now, again,
this is speculation.
I'm not saying that any of that was justified. I'm saying that the people at the helms of power in the U.S. government wanted to be involved in World War II, and so Pearl Harbor was not the reason we entered the war. It was permission to enter the war.
And I'm not saying that the U.S. has any moral high ground to stand on.
No, because we had concentration camps.
Same thing with the Japanese.
Absolutely.
But
we weren't exterminating them.
Yeah. But this goes back to a question I think I've asked you before. If you have the ability to stop somebody from committing an atrocity, and you do nothing, are you complicit in that atrocity?
Nelson and I talked about this with, was it Paths of Glory? No, what movie was it? We talked about this exact same scenario. No, it was
might have been Paths of Glory.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, we talked about this idea of like no, it was Braveheart. It was Braveheart because William Wallace continued to invade, assuming that if he didn't, they would. So he
right.
And I'm in my argument for this, or my side of this would have been what you're saying. Like, I feel if William Wallace would not have invaded those other countries first, it was inevitable that they were going to return the favor.
Speculation.
So I would say, I'm not pro-war, but I would say, like if you're without a shadow of a doubt know that you're going to be attacked upon, I think strategically wise and for value of life to be salvaged, it's better to have the first step. So, so say Pearl Harbor they attacked Pearl Harbor, which they did, according to the facts, and America still chose not to get involved. Do you think we would have been attacked again? Again, whatever the president was at the time, his politics aside or campaigning aside, if we didn't do anything about Pearl Harbor and we let them attack and then they go on and do something else, would they have continued to attack?
Pearl Harbor happened because we didn't do anything about Pearl Harbor.
Wait, say that again? Pearl Harbor happened because we didn't do anything about Pearl Harbor?
Yeah.
Which is under the assumption that we knew it was coming.
There is sufficient evidence to suggest that we knew it was coming, and they evacuated strategically important vehicles.
Tell that to everybody who was on the Arizona.
And so, like with every time they send soldiers in to be killed, they're saying this is an allowable loss.
Who's they?
The people who make the decisions. Okay? So in doing that, they chose not to defend Pearl Harbor. Okay? So I think it's unforgivable that Pearl Harbor happened, both that the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor and that the U.S., those that made the decisions chose not to protect Pearl Harbor. Now, to answer your question of, let's presume that we had no idea and it truly was a surprise despite the evidence.
And we still stayed out of it.
I think it's entirely rational to go to war with Japan after that.
That wasn't my question. Would they have attacked us again to try to
Likely.
continue to provoke us?
Likely.
Okay. So it
they
was
essentially
inevitable.
Yeah, they did.
It was
They invaded
inevitable
the
for us to
Aleutian
be-
Islands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They came close to the coast of California.
Whether they wanted to be involved for political reason or strictly protection of our country, it was inevitable that we were going to be
Right. But the narrative that they attacked us out of nowhere and we were minding our business up until then and we didn't even see it coming, none of that's true. None of that's supported by the evidence.
that you're aware of.
None of it's supported by the evidence.
I want to see the evidence
You
because
have-
you said
have a computer.
there's
Sufficient evidence
you
to suggest.
I don't know. I feel like you were saying like there was assumptions that the evidence exists.
No.
There's evidence
yeah.
that we knew that we were gonna
Declassified information that really paints the picture that the people that made the choices knew.
Okay. I'll do some research off the clock.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued on that because I
think you'll be shocked by what you find.
I usually am. Speaking of, did you guys know Sunshine was gay? And remember the Titans?
That's why I stay inside.
Still rock. Still gets me.
Get that vitamin D.
Man. No.
So,
To be honest, I didn't think about that before I said it.
but I will say, of importance, World War II was the last war that America entered into, satisfying the constitutional requirements for war,
It's the last war that Congress declared war.
which is the U.S. Constitution's requirements for war. Every military engagement since then, by definition, hasn't been a war.
War on Iraq.
War on drugs,
Desert.
Vietnam, Korea.
There was
Poverty.
What was the
Cancer.
one in the war? There was another war in there.
Desert Storm.
Desert Storm. There it is.
War on terror.
Interesting.
Yeah. And also of note, if you're in the National Guard,
Which
by
I am
law,
not.
you cannot be sent into active duty without a constitutional declaration of war, which means that every National Guard member currently serving in active duty and in war zones are there illegally.
Or voluntarily.
Like
Some of them may have chosen.
yeah, no, so they're not conscripted.
Right.
But what I'm saying is, like, by U.S. law, they shouldn't be in an active duty situation because we've not legally declared war by an act of Congress, which is what's required to send National Guard into active duty.
So they couldn't even go if they just asked, "Hey, would you like to go to war?"
I mean, they could enlist in branches of the military that,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So some of them.
but even then, like we just clarified, Vietnam, Korea, Desert Storm, Iraq 2, all of those unconstitutional wars.
Tell us how you really feel.
So you're pro-war, Nelson.
I'm just getting started. This movie, I was just furious from beginning to end.
Really?
Yeah.
Not entertained at all.
No, furious from beginning to end.
Not as furious as the first Ryan that found out his family died.
50% of the men, 50% of men put on that beach that day died. Fish in a barrel, conscripted. Conscription is slavery and war is mass murder. So yeah, I'm pretty passionate about this and not a big fan.
My grandpa survived.
And I'm thankful for that.
Should we start from the top?
Yep. Welcome to Silver Screen's Biases.
So yeah, I mentioned when we walked in the room, this movie just made me really angry. And you're like, why? This is why.
Not everyone was conscripted. Not everyone that fought.
No, but a lot of them were.
A lot of them were.
You're right. A lot of people enlisted after the attack on Pearl Harbor,
Right.
and everything that I just said about Pearl Harbor aside, a lot of them voluntarily enlisted.
Right.
We conscripted more than we enlisted.
My grandfather, he was drafted. He was a manager at a steel plant in Cleveland or something, or a manufacturing plant in Cleveland. And he got his letter saying that he was being drafted into the Army and was to report to officer candidate school at Fort Knox. And that letter was a mistake because he was the last surviving son of my great-grandmother.
Oh,
But he chose to go anyway because he said if his country needs him, he's going to go.
so he could have fought it, and it would have been.
Yeah.
But he went anyway, commissioned as a second lieutenant, and became a platoon leader and survived the war. Got shot in France, right on the border of Germany, but he survived.
He was a part of a D-Day
Mhm.
battle. Wow, Omaha Beach.
I don't know what beach. It might have been Utah.
The two other U.S. beaches had about 90%.
There was only 2 U.S. beaches.
There's 3.
No.
Omaha, Utah, and...
And then Gold Sword and Juneau were the British and the Australians.
You're right. Sorry, I got it backwards. The British and Allied beaches, Gold Sword and Juneau, had 70 and 85%. The other U.S. beach, Utah, had a 95%. And then Omaha had the biggest at 50% casualty, which is just insane.
Not good odds.
And then the whole premise of this movie is based off of a bit of interesting history about the Sullivan brothers.
Oh, more the Nyland brothers.
Okay.
So they mentioned the Sullivan brothers.
And the Sullivan brothers
In
were
the
what
movie.
inspired the law.
Correct. But the Nyland brothers inspired the movie.
Okay.
I don't. Can you clarify both of these brothers for me?
Yeah. So the Sullivan brothers were 5 brothers who were all serving on the same ship, the USS Juneau. And that ship was sunk. This was early in World War II. All 5 brothers died. And after that, Congress passed a law called the Sole Survivor Policy. So for the same reason that Connor's grandfather couldn't be drafted, they wouldn't allow, with limited exception, you could request it, and almost always they turn you down, but brothers could not serve in the same company. Maybe it's even more specific than that, might be the same unit. So that if there was tragic losses, not all the brothers would die. In this movie, because of the Sole Survivor Policy, these brothers were all split up, the Ryan brothers, and 4 of the 5 had died. So they're like, all right, we're going to save the last one. But you say it's based on the
Nyland brothers. So the Nyland brothers, there were 4 of them. One of them was a pilot who was shot down over Burma, and he was presumed dead. One of them died on D-Day. The other one died the day after D-Day, about a mile inland. And then there was one brother left. I think his name was Fritz Nyland. And they went to him and told him that his brothers had died and they were sending him home. And like Ryan in the movie, he tried to fight it, tried to stay, but orders are orders and he had to go. And he ended up going home. And then they found out that toward the end of the war that his brother that was shot down in Burma actually was captured by the Japanese and was in a POW camp. And as the Americans were getting closer to the Japanese, they abandoned the camp and he escaped. And
So
he made it home too.
2 brothers.
that man was Albert Einstein.
But the movie was inspired by the Nylands. But the Sullivans do play a big part in
You
the
said
story.
the Sullivans are represented in this movie.
The Sole Survivor Policy and the Sullivan brothers in USS Juneau is mentioned in that office scene with Branson,
Bryan Cranston
Bryan Cranston.
and Dale Dye. And
Yeah. But what I think is really interesting about this is if we go back to the Civil War, in the Civil War, when you enlisted, like you fought in the same company as all the men from your town. Right? So there's like guys in like Louisiana with their uncle, their brother, and their dad, and they march all the way up to, up to the Mason-Dixon line and watch their uncle's head get blown off. Right? So like the difference in how that was managed between Civil War and World War II is wild to me. But yeah, Sole Survivor Policy. Is that why your brothers enlisted in different branches, or did they just did that have anything to do with it for them?
no, my brother enlisted in the Marine Corps because he thought they were the best. He's wrong, but he thought they were the best. And my brother Colton enlisted in the Air Force because he's the smart one and decided that having a cushier life in the military was for him.
Yeah.
And the Air Force has more money and less people, so they get to spend it on nicer things.
Sure.
So, and I joined the Army because I had family history with the Army, and
Nothing else to do.
it's pretty much nothing else to do. It's the only branch that I wanted. So,
Okay.
and I have
The Navy.
a brother that was adopted by my stepmom. He's in the Navy.
Oh, holy cow! Then there's the National Guard, right? Like, so there's 5.
Yeah.
Well, the
and
National
Space
Guard
Force.
is a part of the Army.
It's part of the Army. Okay. Air Force, Marines, Army, Navy.
Technically, Marines part of the Navy, but they're not.
Is it?
That's true.
That is true.
They're under the branch of the Navy, but they're their own separate thing.
They're very much their own thing.
Or the Department of the Navy, but they're their own thing.
And you got the SEALs, the Navy SEALs, the Marines, Green Berets, which are different divisions.
Really excited to see more come out of Space Force.
Is that so? This is real. Space Force is
Space
real.
Force is a real thing, yes.
Money
What
well
do they
spent.
do at a Space Force?
From my understanding, they monitor satellites and America's interest in space.
Which was already happening before we created a Space Force.
The Air Force was already doing that job.
And they are still doing that job. But also, the Space Force is.
Like NORAD is right outside of the gate from Fort Carson, where I live and work. And it's inside a mountain.
Okay.
Like there's a tunnel, you have to go into the mountain. And on top are a bunch of antennas. And they monitor the airspace and control, planes and everything for the military in North America. They also, I believe, monitor Santa's sleigh on Christmas Eve. But that used to be an Air Force station. And now when you drive down the road, there's a thing that was put over top of the sign that says SFS for Space Force Station.
Huh.
So it's kind of the same thing.
Also, the Space Force logo looks an awful lot like Starfleet.
And their ranks are huge on their chests. It's very weird. I'm not kidding.
I watched
very
the first
weird.
season of Space Force on Netflix.
It was fun.
It was underwhelming.
I liked it.
It was, and then I have not watched the second season.
I also haven't.
But I feel like the race to space with other countries is not as drastic as some people are saying it is. Like
It's not about the race to space.
because I know some people have made it to space. I mean, like some countries have already achieved space stuff.
Hey, well, while we're on the subject, do you believe we've been to the moon?
Yeah.
Do you? Or have you seen the evidence of the sheet in the background moving and changing color and you're like, that can't be real now?
I would not be at all surprised to find out we have been or that we haven't been. I have no opinion on the matter.
There
I think
are.
it's more likely that we have.
I think we have, but there are some
It's
weird
some weird
things.
things. Yeah.
like going through those radiation belts and your cameras work just fine, and some
Yep,
weird
there's
stuff.
some things that
There's
like
some weird
make
stuff.
you wonder. But I wouldn't be at all surprised to find out we've been. I wouldn't be at all surprised to find out that we haven't been. I would not be surprised to find out that when we believe we went, we didn't, but we have been since and not know about it.
Well, I mean, there's those like reflectors on the moon that you can shoot lasers at, and they
Yeah.
bounce back. So
Yeah.
something's been there.
Someone's been to the moon.
Yeah.
Or something.
And apparently, with a high enough powered telescope, you can see the flag in the Sea of Tranquility.
Really?
Supposedly.
We should invest in one with our podcast budget. This episode's going to
Our
pay for
wives
us
will
to
be
get
so impressed
to get a big telescope.
just to get to the bottom of
Take
this.
up the whole city of.
Connor, what do you think of the line? And this is it's in the movie, but he's actually quoting somebody else. There's not a reason why, there's but to do or die. Or do and die, depending on who you ask.
What do I think about it?
Yeah. Now, if you feel that you can't answer this, we can just cut this out.
Well, I would say from a personal point of view, I don't agree.
Okay?
But from a strictly militarily point of view,
Yeah. From a professional.
I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
You got to follow orders. You got to do what you're told, unless it's an unlawful order that you don't have to obey.
If theoretically you don't have to follow an unlawful order, and as we've clarified, none of the wars that we've engaged in since World War II have been lawful wars.
I would love to see you try and do this as an enlisted man.
I'm just curious, like how much does that actually get upheld?
So, I can't speak on Congress's declaration of war
Yeah.
and whether or not our past conflicts have been justified legally. But everybody in the military and the government believed at one point in time that those were lawful wars, for lack of a better term. So you wouldn't be able to just say, I'm not doing this anymore. I mean, look at people like Bo Bergdahl that just walked off of their post one day because they didn't feel like doing it anymore. Then they were captured by the Taliban. We had to go rescue him, and he went to jail. So,
Yeah, because the Taliban doesn't do extradition.
no, they don't.
Not yet, anyways.
Might have even traded for him.
I mean, technically, he was arrested by the Taliban. Do you know anybody that has gone active duty and then become a conscientious objector?
No.
Okay. Because in the email that we received, he talked about somebody that had. Joel said that while he was enlisted, he knew somebody that went active duty. After their first tour, they became a conscientious objector.
I don't know anybody personally.
That wasn't
No.
the email that they wanted to be anonymous, was it?
Well, we didn't use his last name.
Okay.
I don't
I'm
remember
just
his
making
last
sure. I'm
name.
just making sure.
And like I told you before, they do ask you that before you enlist.
Right, but I mean, people like
You can change your mind,
yeah,
obviously.
people change their minds. all the
But
time.
no, I've never met anybody
And when
like
you're
that.
in the service, you have the ability to, I don't want to say quit, but quitting's the right, like you can stop at any time, right?
No.
You can't.
No, you signed a contract. You are there for the duration of your contract unless you are getting out for disciplinary or medical reasons.
What would happen if in the middle of your contract,
Dishonorable discharge for conscientious objection.
which would,
I don't know that.
That's
What would-
my understanding. I may
So,
be
would there
mistaken.
be other,
It's actually very hard to get a dishonorable discharge. You
Like-
basically have to murder or rape somebody.
Oh, I can do that. I couldn't do that.
I know, but just like, but say someone's perspective changes while being, again, this is a scenario, like, and in the middle of their contract, they're like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. This is
So
they legally can't just be like, I'm done. I'm going home.
No, but in that kind of situation, there are avenues to get them out of the military. Essentially, the commander of their company would start a chapter process, probably citing failure to adapt or something like that as the reason why. And it would be a disciplinary chapter. They would have to go through like a bunch of medical tests and everything to make sure that they are fit to get out, which is a weird thing to say, but you have to do that.
And that's kind of what Catch-22 is built around, right? That book.
Yeah. And it's a long process. So it's not like they're just going to be like, hey, I'm done. And they get out a week later. They're still going to be in for probably up to a year and a half. So it's just easier to finish out your contract anyway.
Yeah.
But if you get chaptered out for a disciplinary reason, generally you're going to get an other than honorable discharge, which is not a dishonorable discharge, but it's not an honorable discharge either. There's honorable discharge, general discharge, other than honorable discharge, and then dishonorable discharge.
I had a discharge once.
Yellowish discharge.
Okay, because like as someone who, speaking for myself, like I was never military minded, and I knew my physical capabilities, my not necessarily moral capabilities, but like my aptitude in some things. Like it's like I'm the last person someone wants for me to be involved. Like my personal perspective, I never had it. But I had a fear because when my parents first told me what drafting was, like I don't know why my parents told me this. Like, and it was just weird the way like I had this kind of visceral memory of drafting. And it may have been around the 9/11 time too.
Yeah.
Scared of architects.
But like my mom was like, yeah, once you're like, I forget what age it was then, or if the age is still the same. But my mom was like, yeah, like you could be drafted too until you get to a certain age. Like in my mind, I'm like, what can I do to not be drafted? Because like no one would want me there. Like
Swallow
I would
some
not
cotton
benefit.
balls.
So so I always had this mentality as a child, not because I didn't believe in the military or like I wasn't for it, but like that's not where you want me. And so I was like in my head, I was like, if I got drafted, what could I do to make me look unattractive to him? Like, so this ran through my head for years when my parents first told me what drafting was. Now, granted, there's never been a draft since I've been alive, but that's where this scenario is coming from. It's just like, if that were to have ever happened, I've thought about it.
I mean, there's people that I went to basic training with that just weren't able to complete it for whatever reason, whether that be a mental or physical issue that they had. And they were chaptered out for failing to adapt.
In a draft situation, though, at least in World War II and in Vietnam, a lot of people that wouldn't have made it during a non-wartime enlisting were drafted regardless. Like the people
Yeah,
that
they need bodies.
Yeah. We talked about this briefly toward the end of our episode on Gladiator a few weeks back. I talked about how slavery is, even apart from like the moral issues with slavery, and there are plentiful. It's a wildly inefficient way to allocate labor, and conscription would result in things like you're talking about, Jeff. Like you're not built for military. You shouldn't be there.
Right.
But in a draft situation, they just need bodies for the mill, and they'll toss you in regardless. There's a line in this movie that I really appreciated, which was, "This entire mission is a serious misallocation of valuable military resources." And that was the sniper who said, "Put me within a mile of Hitler and I'll blow his head off and end this whole thing." And
I liked his confidence.
And Connor, I know that even in quote unquote peacetime, you've seen huge misallocation of military resources. I don't know if you're free to comment on that, but
Probably not.
yeah. But I just, it's one of these things that like when you're a monopoly, you don't have to have a competitive advantage.
I will say that the military now runs like most businesses do, where we get a budget every fiscal year, and if you don't spend that budget, it gets decreased for the next fiscal year. So there are times when we have to just spend
That's
money.
not how businesses work.
I know. In the government, that is how it works, though.
Yeah.
And there are times when it gets toward the end of the fiscal year and we've got a surplus and you need to spend it, so they just spend it on random things.
Yeah.
Because they don't want that number to go down for the next year.
Mm-hmm.
So
There was a line I really liked in this movie, which was Tom Hanks' character saying to his men, "Gripes go up, not down. I don't gripe to you, and I don't gripe in front of you." That is terrific management. And that doesn't have to be a wartime thing. Like, if you're in a leadership position, you do not complain to the people that you lead. You don't complain in front of the people that you lead. This is something that my parents taught me.
Can gripes go sideways?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But this is something that my parents taught me when I was a kid, and I didn't realize they were teaching it to me until I was a teenager. They went out of their way to not complain about family issues in front of us.
That's powerful.
And-
I appreciate
And
that.
so when Jen and I were dating, I was like, "Hey, Jen, this is something that my parents did. I think it was really powerful." And we've done the same. I don't think we're near as good as my parents were, but we really try not to complain about each other, argue in front of our kids, complain about other people in front of our kids. We try not to complain about each other to anybody, right? Like we try to keep that, like that's our thing that we need to work out. But the gripes go up, not down. I don't gripe to you and I don't gripe in front of you. That's excellent leadership.
I agree.
I agree to an extent.
Okay.
I think there is a point to where like griping over someone is inappropriate, but I also think there's power in seeing. So I mean, I grew up with my parents in the house and stuff. Like my parents argued. There was some family drama growing up and stuff. And as a child, one of the younger children, like I got to experience and see how my parents worked through it and how they disagreed, but then made up. Like, so there is power in watching respectful and honorable disagreement and still coming together and making amends. Like, so I think there is power in seeing disagreement within people that are above you. And I saw that. Like, my parents didn't argue all the time in front of me. And a lot of times it was at nighttime when they closed their bedroom door and they would talk about something that happened.
That
But
wasn't
there-
arguing what happened behind that closed door.
But there were times where they would do stuff
Fighting like cats and dogs in there.
in front of my sister and and like I found that as valuable because I saw them work through something and at the end show love for each other and go,
Yeah.
we worked through this. And that was valuable for me to learn through. It's like, I think there is value in seeing an altercating in front of someone, but not all the time.
Yeah, but in the military,
Right. Okay. Right.
in this
Military,
context,
yes.
it would be a terrible thing for him
Maybe
to complain
in a
about.
business setting too. But Nelson,
I
you
agree in a
mentioned
business
you
setting,
mentioned
yeah.
you mentioned your parents. Try doing like
Yeah, I mean,
I saw value in watching some of my parents work through issues, some heated debates even, and then watching them resolve it, make up, and then seeing them go back to respecting and loving each other.
Yeah.
So like
I mean,
I
there's an
saw that
argument-
life cycle.
There is an argument to be made that my parents did not give us an example of conflict resolution, right? But also, I think that their choice not to argue in front of us, and I mean, like, that slips away now that we're adults. Now that we're adults, I see my parents argue over stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that they made that choice when I was a kid. A choice that they made later in life, which they wish they had done, and Jen and I try to do, and we fail at regularly, is also try not to complain about your siblings in front of your kids, because that's going to affect the way your kids see their uncles and aunts. So
Aunts.
uncles and aunts?
Aunts, uncles and aunts.
What's an aunt farm?
Well,
Alien aunt farm?
Alien on farm, yeah. Dun, 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 dun.
I've got more here, but Jeff or Connor, is there something you want to touch on before we keep going?
I mean, I've got some historical inaccuracies that I noticed in the movie. I don't know how deep you want to go into the philosophical, but this is more technical.
No, I don't even know how to spell the word.
I believe that.
F-I...
Philosophy.
Philosophy, yeah. Give us one. Give us one.
So going back to the beginning of the movie, as they're coming up to the beach, there's a guy who's driving and he yells 30 seconds or 1 minute or whatever it is. That guy should not be American.
He should be French.
No, he should be British.
What did I say?
You said French.
Wait.
Okay, yeah.
Explain that a little bit. Okay.
So with the Rangers, especially, there were other people that were driving those landing craft to get onto the beach. But for the most part, the naval force that was out in the English Channel was mostly British.
Okay.
And the British were the ones who drove the Rangers
To the
beach.
Okay.
So that guy should have been British.
We did not provide our own shuttles.
Not most of them, no.
Okay.
We did have some. The Coast Guard was actually there driving some of those.
Okay.
While our coast remained entirely unprotected.
True. They did have some U-boats that got right up to our shore. Anyway.
I was trying to be pithy, but yeah, no, that's accurate.
So he should have been British. And I have seen people online complaining that this movie is too rah-rah America, warmongering. I don't think it is. But they use that as an example that the only people you see on the beach are American, and we were a very small portion of that invasion.
Well,
and I didn't know that. Yeah, so that's a good point.
So I finished high school here in the States, and I remember
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You made it.
I remember covering D-Day in history class. So I'm of two minds of this. One, American soldiers, both conscripted and enlisted, huge sacrifice on D-Day. But I was blown away that in my U.S. history class...
You gotta stop using that phrase for this movie.
My mind was blown.
Nope.
That's not any better.
I was blown
Nope.
at how... So I was shocked that in my U.S. history class, they said that there was 2 beaches on D-Day. And I was like, no, there was 5. My teacher was like, what? And I was like, yeah, there was 2 U.S. beaches, but like 3 other Allied beaches. One of them was Canadian. And she's like, that's not what the history book says. And she's right. The history book didn't say that. But so when people say some of U.S. history, especially about World War II, is way too...
Americanified?
Yeah. I agree.
That's what Connor was saying.
But I don't want to make light of the fact that the U.S. did have a huge involvement in World War II, but so did so many other countries.
Right. The whole world did.
I heard recently, and I haven't fact checked this, but Connor, do you know? Saving Private Ryan kind of portrays the boats landing, and that's it. But apparently, they'd made several trips.
Yeah, there were multiple.
Not just waves, but like they would return and do.
Yeah, if they could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I heard of a guy saying that like he did like 5 rounds that day, which like, and each time you're getting, shot at the whole way there.
I also noticed, and it's just a Hollywood thing, but when they jumped off, the guy's getting shot underwater. That's not how bullets work. When they hit water, their momentum is gone, the inertia is gone, and they just sink.
But what about Incredibles when Violet is in the water and she turns invisible and they're still trying to shoot at her and it's going.
You're right. I can't argue with the physics of a Pixar movie.
So strictly just a a physics question. Even if like you're standing right over water and you shoot down into water, the bullet will just immediately.
So
Didn't Mythbusters
They
do the
did-
fish in a barrel
they
thing?
did do this.
Yeah.
The bullet, because so if you think about it this way, right? And this is kind of a morbid way to think about it, but when you jump from a high, people that jump off bridges and stuff, right? They tell you that if you hit water going terminal velocity, that it's like hitting concrete.
Yeah.
Same thing happens with a bullet. It's going a lot faster than terminal velocity, and it's going to hit that water, and it's just going to be hard, and
That's
it's
true.
going to stop all that momentum, and then it's just going to sink.
Yeah. Okay.
So-
So that makes sense.
So people weren't getting shot underwater.
I did see the MythBusters episode where they were following and they had the hammer. They had the hammer that to try to break the water. So I didn't see the bullet one, but I saw the one where they were trying to break the tension of the water.
And the biggest thing with the D-Day scene is that the beach is entirely too short.
Yes. I knew this.
If you notice,
Short as in like left
the distance,
to right? Or
no,
like,
no, the distance from them getting off the boat
Yeah.
to getting to the cliff
100 yards at most.
is way too short for what it actually was. So if you notice the hedgehogs that are on the ground, which are those big like
Yeah, yeah.
jack-looking things,
Yeah.
and then the they called them Rommel's asparagus, which were the giant pieces of wood, like the logs that were propped up.
Mhm.
Those were supposed to be hidden at high tide, so that if a boat tried to come up to land on the beach, it would either hit those hedgehogs and it would rip a hole in it, or those Rommel's asparagus would have mines on the end of it, and the boat would go up the
It's a
log.
great
and then
name,
hit-
by the way.
You know, that's what they called them. It would hit the mine and blow up. And historically, the Allies had landed and done their beach invasions during high tide because it makes the beach shorter. So in North Africa, Italy, that kind of thing, they would do that at high tide. So the Germans thought that if they tried to invade Europe, it would have to be at high tide.
Which, I mean, good on them. Good.
So they put all of those measures on the beach. But the U.S. saw that, or not the U.S., but the Allies
Yeah.
saw that in their surveillance photos.
You just
I did
you
what
just
you said.
did the thing.
I did the thing. Sorry. It's the U.S. is in this movie.
Yeah.
The
They're
Allies,
both sides of this movie. That's how important they were to World War II.
the Allies saw that in their surveillance photos and determined that the only way that they could land at Normandy was at low tide, which means the beach would have been hundreds of yards
Mhm.
to the cliff.
And then you have the cliff.
Like the Rangers specifically, it took them almost an hour to get from when they got off the landing craft to when they got to the edge of the cliff to blow the barbed wire with the Bangalore. In the movie, it's very fast.
In 2007, a board game came out called... I can't think of it. Hold on.
Risk. Monopoly. Shoots and ladders. Sorry. Don't break the ice.
Stratego.
Euchre. Nah, I don't know.
Harry Potter Monopoly.
Dogopoly, which is a thing. It's a real thing. Coufferet. No. that's
Dungeons and Dragons.
Milborn is the game. Coufferet was one of the cards. You're Canadian. Did you ever play Milborn as a kid?
I didn't, but my mom...
I love that game.
Yeah, my mom insisted it's super well known.
Oh,
I never played it. I have a couple copies of it.
It's a great game.
Hungry Hungry Hippos.
It's not.
That's
Hungry
it.
Hippos.
It's Hungry Hippo.
And I believe the game that I'm looking for the name of, we've played before together. I have a copy of it. I love it.
Settlers
It's
of-
incredible.
Pathfinder.
Catan. Dungeons and Old Hags.
All that's coming to mind is Paths of Glory, and I know that's not it.
That's a movie.
Well, if you look at the photos that like the wartime photographers that were there got, you can see just how long the beach was.
I'm going to pick up this idea from where we left off, but I've edited out the dead airspace because I was trying to look up the game. And I don't know how the sentence ended, so I'm just going to launch back into it. In 2007, a board game was published that's won all kinds of awards, tons of expansions. It's got European and Pacific theater called Memoir 44. It's a really terrific game. And the original edition of it is all like D-Day through to the end of the war European theater, just the land battles. And Omaha Beach, like one person plays the Axis, the other side plays the Allies. Omaha Beach, if you are the Axis, it's like you're going to win, like 90% chance to win. It's so unfathomably difficult. And so like most of my knowledge of what the terrain was like for these comes entirely from this game. But it blew my mind the first time I played it, just like how much it was a shooting gallery for the Axis. Like it's shocking that they took the beach at all.
I agree. Did you know that most of the soldiers that were on that western front there at the beach weren't actually German?
I did not know that.
So I think one of the truth claims that this movie tries to say, but I don't think does a very good job, is that the Americans especially, but the Allies weren't as morally good as history tells us.
Yeah, we see a lot of that.
Obviously they were fighting for the
Don't shoot, let them
good
burn.
side, right? But there's that part there where the flamethrower gets up there, which also irked me a little bit because they didn't have flamethrowers on D-Day. That was more of a
Once they'd taken
Pacific Theater thing.
Okay.
The Marines had a lot of those when they would try and clear out bunkers that the Japanese had.
Okay.
But they didn't use those on D-Day.
And then they shot surrendering Germans several times.
Correct. So they use the flamethrower. The guy says, let them burn. And then those two soldiers try to surrender and they shoot them. I don't know if you know what those soldiers were saying because there's no subtitles.
No, I didn't look it up.
They were not speaking German. They were speaking Czech. And they said, don't shoot, don't shoot. We didn't kill anybody. We're not German. We're Czech. And then they die.
And they say that in Czech.
They say that in Czech. And a lot of the soldiers that were there were not German. They were conscripted from other countries that Germany had occupied. So Czechoslovakia, there were some, I think, Western Europe or Eastern Europe guys. I forget what countries, but all those the Eastern European bloc, a lot of them were over there. There was even a Korean soldier fighting for the Germans, not by choice, but it's actually kind of a fascinating story. There was I forget what his name is, but a Korean soldier that was captured by the Chinese, I believe it was, when China occupied Korea. And then when the Soviets came into, or no, it was the Japanese. He was taken by the Japanese when Japan occupied Korea. And then he was forced to fight in like northern China. And then when the Russians or the Soviets came in, they captured him and forced him to fight for the Soviet army. So he was captured by the Japanese, forced to fight for the Japanese. Soviets come in, they capture the part that he's occupying for the Japanese. They force him to fight for the Soviets. He gets sent to the Eastern Front in Europe for the Soviets and then gets captured by the Germans and is forced to fight for the Germans. So he was actually there on D-Day and was captured by the Americans.
That's wild. Did he get returned to Korea?
I believe so. But yeah, a lot of those soldiers were not German. So that's another part where it shows that there's this moral gray area, right? I think going further into the story, because we haven't really delved into the movie too much yet, like the actual storyline of the movie, but Upham, the corporal that's attached to them, I think he is a good allegory for the American just side in the war. At first,
warrior poet of sorts.
Well, no, but at first he doesn't really want to get involved. You know, they go on without him when they're attacking the radar station, and he stays behind. He kind of helps with bringing ammo and things to them, but he's not actually directly involved in the fight. At the end, and I think this was very intentional by Spielberg.
Hold on, there's this spot in the town is it Newville, where he can't, he's too paralyzed by fear to go up the stairs.
I'm getting there right now.
Sorry.
At the end of the movie,
cut that bit out.
At the end of the
what
movie,
an idiot!
Like I said, I think Spielberg put this in intentionally. At the end of the movie, he is on the stairs and he's too terrified to go up and help the one Jewish guy in their squad from being killed by a German that he previously let go. And then at the end, that same German that he let go earlier, right?
That's not the same German.
It is the same German.
The German that he let
Steamboat
go.
Willie.
It's probably just a different dialect.
So I know that the guy at the end is the same one that they.
It's
the same one that kills him upstairs.
Yes, that's part of the reason why he doesn't attack him when he goes down the stairs, because he remembers him from before.
I missed that entirely. Do you mind if I fact checked it?
Go for it if you want to.
I believe you, Connor.
But at the end of the movie, once he's finally surrendered, that's when Upham shoots him, right?
Yes.
And it's an allegory for how long it took the Americans to get into the war. I think it's pretty obvious, going back to Spielberg's other movies like Schindler's List and stuff like that, that he's very invested in Jewish suffering during World War II.
Yeah.
And I think that was a commentary on how long it took the Americans to get into the war to help the Jewish people.
Yep.
So those are just some observations that I had while watching this movie.
Watching this movie, Connor, for specifically the podcast. Did you watch it recently, or is this coming like?
No, I watched it the other day.
Okay. So did watching it specifically, knowing you're going to talk about the podcast, is there was this experience with this movie different? Like, were you watching it with a different mindset, or did you experience it the same way, but just like you do when you watch anything for multiple times, you pick up different things?
Yeah, absolutely. I was definitely more analytical watching it. Mm. It's normally a movie that I'll just sit there and enjoy because I think it's a good story. Mm-hmm. Even if I think that there are some inaccuracies to it. I just think it's a well-made movie. But watching it this time, yeah, for sure, I was paying more attention to subtle storylines and messages that I hadn't picked up on before.
Mm. I couldn't find an answer quickly, so I'm asking ChatGPT now.
The AI is going to tell you?
Yeah. Nelson doesn't get dressed in the morning unless ChatGPT says he's allowed to.
Interesting.
No, it's a different actor because that's a spoken line, and so he is credited. Different character. Now it is Steamboat Willie.
It looks like the same guy to me.
That's just because all Germans look the same. No, it's a different German soldier. But I do have the German soldier that kills Mellish. I have his line translated to English. He said, "Give up. You have no chance. Let us end this. It's easier for you. Way easier. You will see. It's over in a moment." That scene shook me, man.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What about when the medic dies at the radar station?
Yeah, Giovanni Ribisi. Yeah, that was that.
I think the most impactful thing about those deaths for me was when they told Matt Damon's character, Private Ryan, that, yeah, we lost 2 people trying to get you home to your mom.
And they lose more at the end.
Yeah. Like, I mean, yeah, even Tom Hanks' character
decides to stay.
Right. Like, so just like that, it wasn't the loss of those specific characters. It was when Matt Damon realized the weight of what it took to get there, to reach him, and the weight of what it means to either stay or go home. And that was powerful. Because, like, I don't know who I side with. Like, whether Matt Damon should have followed those orders or not. Like I don't know. Like, that would have been a hard decision for Matt, like the character of Matt Damon or myself if I was in that shoes, because like I did enlist to fight. Like I knew the risks going in, hypothetically, if that was my character. We are fighting for our country. There is kind of on the prideful side of myself that I kind of tap into. There would be a part of me that'd be like, I'm not going to leave just because you need me to. Like, I feel like I'm more valuable. Like, I feel like I would side more with Matt Damon than I would with the order of bringing him home.
Yeah,
like,
I can see that.
I get the reason of salvaging families, and like I get that. Like, I mean, I'm anti-war, so like in the big picture, like, yeah, I wish this wouldn't have happened in the first place. But like, if he's already there, they lost 2 people to get there, and like they'll only lose more and as we see it plays out, they lose more just by staying. Like, I think it was more valuable just to let it play out versus how many people were in that troop that went to go find Private Ryan? Like, could those people have been used for a more specific strategy, pro war versus pro saving Private Ryan?
Well, this is a thing that bothers me every time I watch this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that I don't think it's a bad movie, but strategically it makes 0 sense to send a squad of Rangers to go find one guy. The Rangers in World War II were essentially the Navy SEALs of today, right? They were an amphibious assault force.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make sense to me that you would allocate those resources to find one guy. It doesn't make sense to me. Obviously, Operation Overlord, people were dropped all over the place, so you don't know exactly where he's going to be. But you should know the general area that he's going to be in. You know what unit he's in. Yeah. So you'll be able to send a runner or somebody to that unit and say, we need this guy.
They had walkie-talkies back then too, didn't they?
They had
ways
radios,
to communicate.
not walkie-talkies.
Okay. But they had comms.
Yeah, but they also had runners that would run letters.
Put out an APB,
Put out
I
a bolo.
I know that term's incorrectly, but the same idea, just reach out to all the generals. I don't know how military works. I could be way off on this, but I had the same mindset. I was just send out a communication.
It doesn't make sense to me that a captain is in charge of a squad-sized element. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So there's little things that I'm just this doesn't make sense to me.
This story's fictional, but did this scenario happen? Has this scenario happened more than was is this something that has happened where they will take a battalion, a troop, or whatever the correct word is for a group of guys? Will they take a group of guys and instead of taking them strictly battlefield, taking them to retrieve has this happened in real life?
So the brothers you were talking about earlier.
Or answer Nelson's question first.
The brothers you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Did they have to dispatch a group of men to go find him to do it?
No, they knew where he was.
Right.
Okay. Because is there parts of this story that never would have happened?
Yeah, the whole thing.
Okay.
World War II didn't happen.
Other than D-Day, the whole thing is fictional. Even the names of the towns aren't real.
Really?
Yeah. Rommel's not a real town.
Oh. Why would they fictionalize towns for a historical piece? Anyway, that's fascinating. Okay. That was my biggest question of was there a better way to do this? And do they do stuff like this?
I think
pre-communication era.
I think the most important question that we haven't asked here is how did you not notice Vin Diesel for half the movie?
Caparzo, man.
We should have started that. Yeah,
when they entered, what town was that? And the French family is trying to make the American troops take their kids.
I think that was Nouvelle.
I think it was Nouvelle. Caparzo's the one that takes the girl.
And then gets shot by the sniper.
I'm looking up
pictures. He's also on the beach.
I'm looking up pictures right now.
He's he's in the first half of the movie. He's the first guy that say Fubar, and then he tells Upham that it's German.
Okay, I mean, obviously it looks like him now looking at pictures, but I just
egg in a vest.
I didn't know it was Bryan Cranston until after watching the episode.
Yeah, well, it's hard to recognize him without the other arm.
It's true. It's the two arms.
That was the weirdest choice to me.
Yeah,
why make him an amputee?
I hope it was his idea. Okay. I hope Cranston was I'll do it.
I remember the scenes from the pictures with Vin Diesel in it. I guess I just didn't realize. I wasn't thinking that. Vin Diesel's in this movie. I wasn't thinking about him until after these scenes were done. Then I must.
Paul Giamatti's in it.
Yeah.
He is wonderful.
Fillion plays the first Private Ryan.
That's right.
I don't think I even picked up on that cameo.
From Minnesota.
Dude, do you have facial dysphagia?
I don't know what that is, but
it's when you don't recognize people's faces. You're face blind.
Maybe. Connor.
Oh, and to bring it back to not A Clockwork Orange, I'm sure you have a tie into that somewhere. I don't.
No shared cast or crew.
To bring it back to Remember the Titans. Well, if there's a listen.
There you go. There's our tie-in.
If there's a tie-in to Remember the Titans, I got you.
Remember the tie-ins.
The guy who's deaf, who says he knows Orion, is Gary Bertier from Remember the Titans.
I did recognize him. Yes.
You recognize the B-list actor, but none of the A-list?
I was like, I recognize him to the fact that I was like, he looks familiar.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I didn't put much thought into it. But yeah, okay. Yeah, Gary Bertier.
Yeah.
There's a quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson that Upham repeats.
It's not a real person.
War educates the senses, calls into action the will, perfects the physical constitution, brings men into such swift and close collision in critical moments that man measures man. Connor, what do you think of that?
Oh, you put me on the spot here. Yeah, I mean, I've never been in combat before, but that sounds pretty accurate to me.
Okay, works for me.
What's interesting to me is Ralph Waldo Emerson also has never been in combat.
Yeah. Yeah.
That checks out, Nelson.
Yeah. So that line from Ralph Waldo Emerson, who's never seen combat, and then some of the lines in this, put together by a man who, Spielberg, who's never seen combat. I wonder how much the artist class accidentally glorifies war without knowing anything about what war's like.
Well, I will say that Dale Dye was the military advisor on this movie, who was a Marine. He's in the scene where they're in the headquarters building talking about trying to save
So all
Private
the
Ryan.
inaccuracies are his fault?
Sure. But he knows what combat's like. He was also an advisor on Band of Brothers, which they did right after this. He plays Colonel Sink in that series. So he knew what war was like. He actually had to rein in Spielberg at one point because Spielberg wanted to Hollywoodize it and make the explosions big and giant fireballs and all this stuff. And he told him to take those explosions and dial them back by about half because movies are always bigger than they are in real life. So I think a lot of it is fairly accurate. I mean, obviously I wasn't there, but from what
Breaking news: Connor was not on.
I was not.
Hold on, I'm going
on
to fact
D-Day.
check this.
But I do know that there are a lot of veterans of D-Day that said that this is the closest that they've ever seen to experiencing it again, so that people know what they went through. And it got to the point where the VA had to set up a hotline for veterans to call if they had PTSD triggers from watching Saving Private Ryan. And it's the first movie that's ever happened to. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the camera was in the action.
But because of VA inefficiencies, that hotline wasn't set up till 2005.
That's probably true too.
To all of our VA efficiency listeners out there, sorry.
I'm not.
So while I've never seen combat, I can tell you that what Ralph Waldo Emerson said sounds pretty accurate to me.
Okay.
And when it comes down to it, it's you and the guy across from you that's also trying to kill you.
Sure. Yeah. No. Absolutely. Yeah. There's a couple other lines that are not quotes. Like they're in the movie, but they're not quoting other things that also kind of glorify war. Actually, I guess the first one is, so I don't know if it's true. The letter that they read that's supposed to be from Abraham Lincoln.
That is a real letter from Abraham
okay.
Lincoln.
So in that letter, there's two lines there that I take umbrage with. Died gloriously on the field of battle and laid so costly a sacrifice upon the altar of freedom. That second one really gets at me because of my religious convictions. The altar of freedom. I don't even know how to begin to explain why that bothers me, but that gloriously on the field of battle, I think the heartbreaking truth is that it's not glorious. It's a tragedy every single time. It's not glorious. It is unfortunately common.
No, but it's glorified by the people who, one, weren't there.
Sure.
And two, in hindsight.
Yeah. Glorified, yes. Glorious, no.
It's never glorious for the people that are there.
Right. It's horrific. And then the other line, and this is at the end, I don't remember who said it to who, but they referred to America's involvement in World War II as a attempt to, quote, rid the world of tyranny and oppression. I think it was actually that same guy that was reading the Abraham Lincoln letter. I think it was him with a different letter to somebody else who had died. And he said that so-and-so died to rid the world of tyranny and oppression. And the tragic irony being that World War II was not the end of tyranny and oppression.
No, but it did end a large part of tyranny and oppression of the day.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt that that D-Day was instrumental in ending in our history, right? Because history doesn't have counterfactuals. It's undeniably true that D-Day was instrumental in ending the tyranny and oppression of the German National Socialist Party. But it almost seems trite to say that somebody died to rid the world of tyranny and oppression, especially when we're so many years removed and tyranny and oppression is still very much a reality.
Well, I think it's just a turn of phrase to try and provide some level of comfort to somebody who lost a loved one. But I think you'd be naive to believe that a war of any kind is going to completely end a certain aspect of human nature.
But But don't we often hear that kind of language being used about any given war? And isn't that part of the whole propaganda that gets men to enlist and gets family to be proud of the tragedy rather than, or be proud of the person that died tragically rather than be outraged that the tragedy became necessary? Like, I feel like that kind of language betrays rather than honors the fallen.
I guess it's a matter of perspective. This is after years and years of, you doing your own research and you having your religious beliefs and political beliefs and everything. Those obviously affect your bias toward how you feel about it. But
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. And somebody else isn't going to feel the same way,
I suppose.
And do you think your perspective would be different if you were more attached to something of this event? Like if you experienced something more of this involvement?
Well, yeah, like if my best friend Connor here, for example, were to be sent off to Ukraine to fight to end tyranny and oppression and died, no, I would not feel that such a letter would honor his memory. I would be only further outraged.
I would not be for that. Just so we're clear.
Now, Connor, your point that my biases being what they are probably color that picture a lot. I just when a family gets notified that their son died on a beach in Normandy, I feel like the proper reaction is outrage. But those are my biases.
It's about how they grieve, right?
Yeah.
But in the end, hindsight, that war did end some tyranny and oppression in the world.
True.
Today, if somebody were to go to Afghanistan back when we were still there and die fighting the Taliban, I know a lot of people who feel like that was all for nothing, right? Including people that I work with, people that were there.
A lot of men survived the war only to come back and take their own lives because of how much they felt it was nothing.
But I don't think that negates what that person did because of the fact that today it's an all volunteer force.
Yeah, fair.
Right? You raised your hand, you said, "Send me."
Yeah.
If my country needs me. Right? Now, obviously we can debate the politics of whether or not we actually needed to be there in the first place. That's a completely different subject, but as a service member, you don't really get to choose where the politicians send you.
Yeah.
You just have to do your best to try and still be a good person, save the people who are next to you, and get home to your family, which is a big thing in this movie too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, Captain Miller says multiple times that he just wants to get home to his wife.
Yep. What's the line? If that earns me the right to get back to my wife, then that's my mission.
Right. And I think that reinforces what I said last time during the Full Metal Jacket episode, where the soldiers, the service members, sailors, Marines, whatever, that are involved in the conflict, there's going to be a little bit of that political bias or whatever you want to call it, because the politicians are the ones who send you there.
Yeah.
But your main goal is to get home.
In this movie, is there any dialogue that tells us which of these men, if any, are conscripted versus enlisted?
Not that I noticed, no.
Yeah, not that I caught either. I thought that was a scene that was incredibly interesting. So as we've discussed, EMS and military share a bond in that you guys have a lot of gallows humor, right?
Oh yeah, we're very dark.
And there's that gallows humor happening.
I have double because I'm both.
Yeah. So there's that gallows humor where they're making jokes about playing poker with the dog tags.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't see all the men walking by who are seeing this, but also grieving the men who those dog tags belong to. So the gallows humor meets the reality of the situation, and there's interesting tension there. And I like, it made me wonder, because as much as I love dark comedy, I've never been in a situation where that dark comedy could come face to face with the thing that you're making jokes about. Have you ever been in a situation like that where there's sudden tension because the thing that you're joking about is like right in your face?
I'm sure I have. I mean,
you're just not terribly observant.
No, it's just I mean, I'm sure that there was a time when we were like on a drop zone or something, and there was somebody who got really messed up from an improper parachute landing or whatever.
Yeah.
And we were making jokes about it, and their first sergeant or their friend or whatever was packing their chute behind them.
Yeah.
Or behind us, and we didn't know. But nothing comes to mind, like off the top of my head.
Okay. Because it's kind of like when you're making fun of somebody's mom and then you find out their mom died of cancer 5 years ago or last year, right?
I think it's more telling that in that scene, the soldiers had really only experienced combat for 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
Before they were already that callous to it.
Yeah. Well, we know that the guys that we follow in the movie, most of them had already served under that same captain prior to D-Day.
Yeah, but that was all training.
Oh, well, at least one of them mentioned serving in the African campaign.
That might be true,
Yeah.
but I don't think it was under Captain Miller.
Okay. Fair enough.
I'm not saying that they were all not combat veterans at the time, but I think most of them, their first experience of combat was probably D-Day.
Okay. Yeah. I hadn't made that assumption or connection. Yeah. Connor, Jeff, I turn it over to you. I got nothing left here.
I'm reading this quote.
Jeff's
here.
been quiet. I want to hear from Jeff.
Yeah.
I'm reading this. I have one last quote here. I'm seeing if
I
it's,
soapbox plenty.
I'm seeing if it's still relevant here. I'm going to say this quote, and if we already acknowledge this, we can move on. Captain Miller and Sergeant Horvath are talking. Captain Miller says, "You see, when you end up killing one of your men, you tell yourself it happened so you could save the lives of 2 or 3 or 10 others, maybe 100 others. Do you know how many men I've lost under my command?" Sergeant Horvath, "How many?" Captain Miller, 94, but that means I've saved the lives of 10 times that many. Doesn't it? Maybe even 20, right? 20 times as many. And that's how simple it is. That's how you rationalize making the choice between the mission and the man. What I kind of took from that line, not necessarily a specific bias, but just this idea of like, you have, correct me if I'm wrong, Connor, you have to kind of code switch when you go into a battle mindset. If you get deployed, you have to get past the fact that like you may be taking a life versus like you kind of have to code switch, right? Like, and I kind of take this as like they're in the middle of a battlefield. So this line came out of like you just got to look at it as a number. Like you just kind of got like look at it as a number and move on. That's how I perceived it. But someone who's not on the battlefield, I see that as a little cold. Like to relate it to something that I'm familiar with in the church industry, like there's that whole debate of like it's not about how many people are in the seats, it's about how many lives you impact. But then there's that counter argument of like, but every person in a seat has a soul. So like, just this specific quote just kind of reached out to me as like, is it a strategic mindset to make wartime involvement digestible, or was this specific just coldness towards humanity?
I don't think it's coldness towards humanity. I mean, that's just how warfare is. They even tell you when you're joining, at least my recruiter did, that you're just a number to the army, right? They can replace you tomorrow if they need to, although they are having a bit of a recruiting issue now.
Turns out that's not true.
But at the time, it was.
This episode is actually sponsored by the U.S. Air Force. I'm just kidding.
And they tell you that. But the thing is, you create this bond with the people that are around you, right? So that commander knows every single person that they lost, but they have to keep moving because they have a mission to do.
Right.
It's the reason why he doesn't complain about the mission that he obviously doesn't actually think they should be on. If that infects the men, it's going to compromise the mission. The mission is the most important thing to him.
Right.
Right. And it's kind of the same just throughout the military as an organization. I have very close friends, people that I created this bond with over years of going through some of the stupid and terrible things that we have to do in the military, right? You create this almost like a trauma bond, as bad as that sounds, with these people
that have been through something specific that no one else can experience.
That are really, they're really close to you. But then there's people who are in the same organization as you that you've never met before that die. And it sucks. It's sad, but I don't particularly feel anything for that person. I had, there was a just as an anecdote, a captain that I went to California with, he wasn't like directly in my chain of command, but he went with this entire group of us that went to California. We were there for a month for a training exercise. He seemed fine. A couple times I interacted with him. He was, a happy-go-lucky kind of guy on the outside, but he's apparently going through some stuff on the inside. And when we got back to North Carolina, he ended up taking his own life. And we went to his funeral and everything, and it was a sad affair, but I didn't really feel much of anything because I didn't know him. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how it is in a military organization. Like it sucks that those people died, but you don't really know them, and they get replaced pretty fast.
Yeah. And you're kind of driven to move on pretty quickly and go on to
you have a job to do. Right. You got to continue mission. Charlie Mike.
As much as it is in the time of war, like, again, correct me if I'm wrong. This is just my presumption. Like in the time of war, as much as it is a goal to save the humanity you're fighting for, there is that mindset of you just got to get over it and keep moving forward, no matter what you're stuck in the middle of right away. Like that's, yeah. And I can't even come close to comprehending something like that.
Right after the line you read in the same conversation, he says, "This Ryan better be worth it. He better go home, cure some disease, or invent a longer-lasting light bulb or something. Because the truth is, I wouldn't trade 10 Ryans for one Vecchio or one Caparzo." And then later he says to Private Ryan, "Earn this," as he's dying. So his dying words is, "Earn this."
Yeah.
Connor, I know that you haven't seen combat, but I assume some of the men and women that you've worked with have seen combat.
Correct.
Do you think that this kind of attitude towards the people that are so like as much as I oppose the war on terror, for example, it's undeniable that the men and women that have fought in Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria and and Libya and on and on, they believed that what they were doing was going to be of huge importance and help to the people there.
Well, maybe.
Do you think that this kind of bordering on resentment is common within the military? Is it something that the military kind of prepares people to fight against? What's your take on this?
I would say it's pretty common. You get a mission order that comes down, and you have to execute that mission, but you're not really told. For the most part, you're not told why. So there's a lot of times when you're just like, this is stupid. Why am I doing this?
Yeah.
There's a lot of that. I think I forget what his name is, but the guy who's from New York, who's like really outspoken.
Donald Trump.
No, in the movie.
Oh.
Rockefeller.
He's very outspoken about the fact that he doesn't think that this is worth their time. He doesn't want
His last name is like Ryan, Riennne.
Maybe.
And it was confusing for me for a bit.
But he's very outspoken as like he doesn't believe that this is a good allocation of resources.
He's the one that
Doesn't
almost
think
walks off, right?
Yeah. That wants to kill Steamboat Willie.
Yeah.
When they let him go. That guy. And then toward the end of the movie, he becomes close to Ryan and is doing everything to make sure that he survives so that he can get home to his family. So there's context that you just don't have at the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's some resentment.
Do you think resentment is the right word for it?
Maybe. I don't know what else you would call it.
Okay. Because I know I was the one that said resentment, and it's like having not seen combat, having like I know people that have seen combat, but I don't discuss it with them because I know that it's not appropriate to ask military people about the combat they've seen. That's really a conversation for other combat vets to have with other combat vets, or with trained professionals.
It goes down to just like normal things that we do in the military too, right? So like as an NCO, which is what I am,
yeah,
my primary job is to provide purpose, direction, and motivation to the soldiers underneath me.
Is that like on paper?
Yes.
Okay, so that's a direct quote.
Yeah. Purpose, direction, and motivation is your job. You're there to train, and you're there to make sure that the soldiers underneath you have a reason to do their job.
Okay.
But
And I assume that that's probably true of every rank within the military that's managing other people.
Yeah. But there's things that we do just on a normal everyday basis that the soldiers underneath you are going to, for lack of a better term, you can quack this out, just and complain because they don't want to do it.
I'm definitely going to quack out complain.
You should. Like going to the motor pool and we have to do a layout of our vehicle to make sure that it has all the equipment that it's supposed to have, right? And the commander has to come through and check off everything that is supposed to be on the list for that vehicle.
Yeah.
People are going to complain about that because they got to be out in the hot sun all day, taking stuff out, laying it out for one guy to walk through and go, yep, it's there, put it back.
Yeah.
Right? But there's a reason for it.
Yeah.
Even if they don't see that reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, long way to answer your question. Yes, that happens in the military constantly.
I suppose it happens outside the military, like in every job as well. Any good people manager is going to. What are the three things you're supposed to be doing? Purpose, direction, and motivation. I feel like that's a little redundant, but yeah, I mean, any good leadership personnel should be doing that. Should be able to do that on top of a host of other things. Yeah. Okay. You in a leadership position, how do you feel that you do about the gripes go up, not down? I don't gripe to you, and I don't gripe in front of you.
I try to do the same thing. Yeah. I struggle with it sometimes. There's certain things that the military just does that I can't stand, like for instance, the other day I was sitting in the office just talking about the fact that I'm forced to live in the barracks because I'm an unmarried soldier, even though I'm 31 years old and I'm forced to live with a 21-year-old
who you outrank and so you can't fraternize with.
Right. And it bothers me that they don't just give me the opportunity to move out on my own.
Yeah.
Because I joined late. So I'm a little older than somebody who would be in my position normally would be.
Yeah.
Right. So I was complaining about that to another NCO, the same rank as me, but there was another soldier in the room that was 3 ranks lower than I am that heard everything.
So with the gripes go up, not down, in the military, that's not just the people that directly report to you, but anybody that you outrank.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you don't want to affect the way that they do their job and the way that they see the organization, right? You want them to again stay motivated to do their job.
Do you think
even if it's a false motivation?
Do you think that principle equally applies outside the military?
The gripes go up, not down?
It's not just the people that answer to you, but anybody that you quote unquote outrank. So, for example, let's say that you work for a large corporation and you have a title of director. Your complaints should be with other directors and people that are above you, and people that are below the director position. It is inappropriate for them to hear your complaints about the organization you both work for.
I think for the most part, it's situational, though. If it's something that's going to affect everybody, then I think that people have the right to know.
Okay. Do you think that's true in the military as well?
Yeah.
Right to know?
Yeah. But there are also, certain things that they shouldn't or can't know.
Yeah.
It's very situational. I would say, just going back to the movie.
Yeah.
You mentioned at the end when Tom Hanks's character, Captain Miller, is dying and he says to Private Ryan, "Earn this." That I believe Spielberg is talking to the audience there, right? Like he's talking to Private Ryan because of all the people that died for him. Yeah. But I think that at the time that this movie was made, there were a lot of...
What conflicts were we engaged in 95? Or 98?
Well, Desert Storm was over. I don't know when Kosovo ended.
Hold on, I've got a list up.
Clinton.
What year?
98. Clinton and Kosovo, I think, was
98 was the Kosovo. 98 and 99 was the Kosovo conflict.
Yeah.
Right.
I have a list of wars and their dates in chronological order up. So Kosovo conflict was 98, 99. But the Bosnian conflict ended in 95. And then the one on the other side of that would have been the Afghanistan war in 2001.
I think there were a lot of movies and media at the time that were sort of anti-war, not explicitly, but like things like talking about the Vietnam War and stuff like that. And Spielberg was making this movie to show quote unquote, the greatest generation, right? And what they did for the world. And that is a quote, the Earn This was a quote that the audience was supposed to take as a, earn what these people did for you so that you can live in this free country.
For the audience at home, there was air quotes around it.
There was. I can't say that,
Could
though.
you do the air quotes right into the microphone, please?
But I think that was meant for Ryan and for the audience, right? And I think that it's telling that at the end of the movie, when Ryan's an old man, he's visiting the cemetery, he looks at his wife and says, "Did I live a good life?" Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he doesn't even say. I thought it was really interesting. The questions that he asks his wife, "Was I a good man?" That is like, if we look at the context of the conversation that Miller had with what's his name, where he says he better cure some disease or invent a longer lasting light bulb. When we see all we see of Private Ryan as an old man is that he's got kids. That's all we know. He's got kids and he's got grandkids, and he questions whether or not he earned it. Do you think that Spielberg is also compelling the audience to question whether or not we've earned it since then?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was most of the point.
Yeah. I've got 2 questions about this movie, because like we usually getting into our wrap-up questions, really.
Yep.
There's 2 questions that apply to every war movie that we do, but don't apply to a lot of the movies we do. 1, as a war movie, do you think that this movie glorifies war?
I don't.
Okay.
I wouldn't say so either.
I know there are some people who do.
Okay. Do you think that any military personnel think that this movie glorifies war that you've interacted with? I don't know if you've ever brought it up, but
No.
if you would do me the personal favor of asking around, I'd like to hear some opinions.
Yeah, I can do that.
And then the second question, do you think that this movie is anti-war?
No.
Okay. Do you think it's pro-war, or do you think it sees war as a necessary evil?
I don't think it's pro-war. Potentially the necessary evil, but I don't think that it's explicitly promoting
with
that
the necessary evil part. Like, you don't really, this movie really doesn't go into full detail of why the war is happening.
No, it doesn't.
You're literally just in a snapshot of a specific battalion, if that's the correct word, a specific troop that's doing a specific task.
Their squad.
Okay. Like, you don't really know. It doesn't go into context of why World War II is happening. It's like,
right.
I definitely wouldn't say this is a movie that goes into the meaning of why they're fighting.
They don't even really go in. I mean, like I said earlier, their primary objective is to get home.
Yeah.
It's not to end Nazi tyranny, it's to get home.
Well, yeah, so I would almost even question that. We know with Captain Miller, is that right?
Yeah. Captain
Miller, his goal is to get home. And if this mission is going to bring me closer to getting home, it's my mission. With the sniper, his goal was to do anything he could to end the war, which I mean you might say that that's a distinction without a difference, though.
But historically, when men enlisted for World War II specifically, their contracts were written or worded in a way that they were to be in service until the duration of the war, right?
Okay.
So their primary goal is to end the war as fast as possible to get home.
Okay. Yeah. So, like, modern military contracts are for a period of time, like a X amount of years. X amount of years of active duty and 8 total years, right?
Technically, yeah.
Yeah. Whereas the contracts for enlisting in World War II were until this war is over. Do you think that led the people deciding, the people at the highest levels of the chain of command, do you think that created any amount of incentive to prolong the war unnecessarily?
No.
Okay. Now, this is just my own ignorance. What happened to soldiers in the European theater? Because the European theater ended before the Pacific theater. So when the European theater was, quote unquote, won, what happened to those soldiers?
A lot of them, not all of them, there was, from my understanding, there was a lottery for soldiers that had a certain amount of points to be able to go home. If you had a certain amount of points, you were eligible to go back home and you were done. if you didn't have a certain amount of points, and points were given based off of what you did, so the medals that you earned, things like that, which is still how they do the point system in the military now for promotions. But if you had the points, you could go home. If you didn't have the points, then you went straight into training for the Pacific Theater, because they
Very different war.
Yeah, it was a different war. It wasn't over yet, so they thought at the time you're going to go straight from Europe over to the Pacific Theater, help out the mostly Marines that are over there, to try and end the Pacific campaign. Most of them didn't end up making it over there because we dropped the atomic bombs, which ended the war before they could get there. But from what I understand, most of them went straight back into training in Europe for the Pacific Theater.
Okay. So when you say it was points and the points have to do with promotions, does it basically work?
Now it does.
Okay. So my question was going to be, did it mostly work out that rank determined who went home? But you're saying no.
No, it was based off of the things that you earned while you were there. So like, let's say you earned a Bronze Star.
Yeah.
That was worth X amount of points.
Yeah.
If you had, I don't know the specific number, but let's say 20 points.
Yeah.
Based off of the medals that you earned in the European theater, if you hit that 20 points, you went home.
Did your grandfather train for Pacific Theater?
No, because he was wounded and was sent back to England and then ultimately sent back to the United States.
Okay. Today I was up at the county fair for Americans for Prosperity. I was helping with the booth there for a little bit, and they positioned us directly across from the Marine recruiters. And I
watched everybody do pull-ups.
I watched a lot of people attempt pull-ups. I watched a Marine do several pull-ups and a lot of other people attempt to do pull-ups.
Yeah.
But I also saw a lot of people walk by the booth, say, "Thank you for your service." And I watched the discomfort on the Marines.
Yep. It happens every time.
And more than the discomfort I saw in the Marines, I saw how people didn't recognize the discomfort.
Okay.
That was really, and that almost makes it seem somewhat hollow, like in church when you see somebody that you haven't seen for a while and you say, "How you doing?" and they're like, "Great, how are you?" And there's more to it, but you don't have the time to really stop and have the conversation. It was interesting to see the people say, "Thank you for your service." The Marines uncomfortably not know how to respond, and people not know what to do with that. Or not even notice.
From my layman's perspective, though, as someone who has said that to multiple people, because in my mind I'm trying to acknowledge what they're doing because I have no grasp on what fully the sacrifices that they're potentially willing to put themselves into, or because I am the type that would do that. I absolutely have done that in the past. I've walked next to people I've never met. When I worked at Chipotle, we'd have people come in. We'd have people come in uniform. They'd get a meal, and as they would walk, I'd be like, "Hey, thank you for what you guys are doing. I appreciate it." And they'd walk out. Like, I meant it in all sincerity. And I've probably said it in the last year as well, too. And I know I said it to you the first time we met.
Yeah.
Like, as defense of someone who does say that, not necessarily knowing the weight of it, there is a genuineness to it of just like the acknowledging the fact that you're doing something that I can't or shouldn't do. Is it inappropriate for us to thank a serviceman or lady? Like, are you saying we should just stop?
I don't know that's what I'm saying either. Because
my heart still tells me, like, I want to acknowledge the people that are doing something that I'm not doing, that are doing something bigger and better than what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Like, I want to acknowledge them.
Yeah. No, so
that's my heart.
I recognize that it makes them uncomfortable. And so I don't say it because I don't want to make people let me clarify. I enjoy making people uncomfortable.
Right.
Depends on the context, though. And this is something that I'm not comfortable making people uncomfortable with.
So thanking someone for something.
I don't do it, but that doesn't mean that people shouldn't do it. The truth is, I don't know what to do with that.
I guess, like, what would, as someone who's in the service is not really a big fan of that phrase, like, you're not offended by when people do it, are you?
No.
Okay.
So I don't think any service member is offended by it.
Okay.
And I think most of us appreciate it. But like Nelson said, it's a hard thing to respond to. Like, you don't really know how to, saying thank you feels weird. Saying you're welcome is not the proper response.
A little pretentious.
You got it, boss.
All right, thank me.
Can I get this burrito for free, please?
Fill my gas tank?
But there are, I mean, it's just it's a hard thing to explain. Like it's just a weird thing to experience. You know, like when I got out of basic training, we were flying to AIT, which is the Army's secondary school where you learn your actual job. Basic training is just to learn how to go from a civilian to a soldier, and then AIT is where you learn your job. We were at the airport, and they forced us to go in uniform. So a bunch of us are sitting in a restaurant at the airport getting some food because it was lunchtime or whatever, and we still had 4 or 5 hours to wait for our plane because they drop everybody off at the same time, but we're all going to different bases across the country. So we're sitting there eating some food. At the end of it, we asked for the check, and the waitress came over and said it had already been taken care of, right? And at that point, I had been in the Army for 3 months. I'm like, I haven't done anything yet. You know?
I haven't earned this.
Yeah. And it felt weird, right? But at the same time, people don't think about the things that you sacrifice when you join the military. Like they always talk about, going to war and you have to leave your family and, you don't know when you're coming home or if you're going to come home and all the mental trauma and everything that comes with it. But just being in the regular military, just on a normal basis, there are all kinds of things that you miss. I missed last Christmas. I missed birthdays. I haven't been home for my birthday, just seeing my family on my birthday in the past 4 years. My grandfather died. I wasn't there for that. My mom was diagnosed with a terminal illness, and I haven't been there for that. Like there's all kinds of things that you sacrifice, and then you go wherever the government tells you to go. So it's not that we don't appreciate it. It just
don't know how to respond.
Yeah, you just don't know how to respond to it. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting. This is a very Ayn Rand thing about this. Ayn Rand glorified entrepreneurs, right? Like there was nobody better in the world, in her opinion, than somebody that provided a product or service that somebody needed. But it would be weird to go to like Elon Musk and say, thank you for your service. And so I think, and I don't know, maybe this kind of answers the question a bit. The people that, especially now where it's a full enlistment, military, no conscription, the people that are there, to some degree, it's because they want to be there. And so it's a little bizarre to thank people for that, just like it'd be bizarre to thank somebody for, like, you don't go to a septic guy and be like, hey, thank you for your service, right?
Yeah, but it's different because in the military you volunteer to give up a lot of your rights and freedoms that
true.
People take for granted every day.
Yeah.
No,
you're absolutely right. Yeah, so I don't say thank you for your service only because I don't know what the proper way to handle the situation is, and I know that it makes them uncomfortable and they don't know how to respond, and I don't want to put them in that spot. I have a group chat of former coworkers from another job. Almost everybody in that group chat is combat vets and me. We're ideologically aligned. That's why I'm there. But anytime any one of them mentions their military career in any way, even if it's like, yeah, when I was in basic, X happened, all the other guys will say TYFYS, right? Thank you for your service, just to rag on them.
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting as well, that not only are they uncomfortable when civilians say it to them, they say it to each other mockingly. And that's a bizarre dynamic. It's a little bit gallows humor, probably.
Yeah, we do that all the time.
Yeah.
I did that before I came home on leave. Somebody had to go do something with one of the patients where the patient was in a vulnerable position, and they had to do some things that I won't divulge on here. But he came back. He came back into the office and told us all about what he just had to do with this patient, and we were like, "Thank you for your service."
And how did so in those situations when it's mocking and satirical, how do people respond?
They laugh.
Okay,
it's just a joke.
Yeah.
Dark humor is the lifeblood of the military.
Sure.
Our mental states would not be healthy if we didn't have it.
I had a conversation with someone not too long ago that's in the
well, dark humor, nicotine, and caffeine. Those are the lifebloods of the military.
Breakfast of Champions.
They work in the social justice division of like international. I don't know if I'm actually missing the specific title of what they do. Like, they work internationally with women who have been either sex trafficked adjacent or in the sex trafficking industry.
Yeah.
And but they also come from a social work background, education. And she had also said that they get through it by some coarse humor.
Yeah.
You have to.
Making light of hard situations, which making light in conversation, but also like not belittling the situation, but just joking your way through it. Like, yeah. So like my wife and I struggle with infertility, and actually we still struggle with infertility. And so I'd made an infertility joke because I also cope with humor, whether it's heavy situations or just lighthearted, like a little just sarcastic nudge. Like, I do cope through situations with humor. And so I said something acknowledging, the kind of past that my wife and I have been through with our infertility struggle. She then said something about the foster care, like just kind of in that same humor. I was like, okay, cool. I'm not alone. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not the only one making these jokes, but also acknowledging the depth of which this system runs. So yeah. So no, I appreciate that from a completely different category of humor to get through something. I appreciate that, because if I couldn't have cracked some dark jokes about some of the situations I made the early on in our infertility journey, I think enough times passed I can share this. I made the Hagar joke from the Bible. You guys familiar?
I know who Hagar was, but I don't know what the joke is.
Okay, so
I think that's like a caveman on a comic strip or something.
Hagar the Horrible?
Yeah.
I think he's a Viking.
Abraham was promised a lineage to his wife Sarah.
Yeah.
They were like old as dirt.
Yeah, in
So
the 90s.
Abraham or Abram, depending on the time of the story, he had a name change.
He was
He went and slept with his servant Hagar.
Sarah's servant.
Right, okay. A servant Hagar. I made the joke early on in our infertility service journey of, Lindsay, if we come across anyone named Hagar, let me know. Okay, not any intention of being unfaithful to Lindsay or seeking out different biological ways of creating children.
Yeah.
But just, in my mind, I was like, I'm going to say it because it's going to make me feel better. Lindsay, I think there was some silence for some time after I made that joke. And it wasn't until afterwards, like, Lindsay, I didn't mean that in seriousness. I was like, I'm also coping. I'm also working through this, and I cope differently. And so she's like, I don't appreciate it. It's like, okay, I'll say jokes to somewhere else, but like I didn't. So like I had to work through it, but I did realize in that scene, I was like, okay, some jokes aren't meant for everyone. I just appreciate that.
We should start a surrogate agency called Hagar for Hire.
No comment. But yeah, my Lindsay and I learned a lot about our marriage and our relationship in that scenario and how dumb I can be. So
I also love jokes that push boundaries, and my wife does not sometimes. So there are certain subject matter that are off limits to make jokes about. This has been an enlightening episode.
It's been all right.
Your point about Upham being a surrogate, a Hagar of sorts, for Spielberg communicating directly to the audience about the U.S. involvement in World War II, and then I think that those are incredibly spot on, and I missed it entirely. So thank you for bringing that to the table. We have some wrap-up questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Would you guys recommend this film? Ooh. Not an immediate response.
Connor?
I would. Absolutely. I think there's some historical inaccuracies. I think that it definitely paints a picture of the U.S.'s involvement in the war as more than it, well, not more than it was, but that the rest of the Allies didn't have as much of an impact, which I don't believe is correct, but that's just American history in a nutshell anyway.
That's fair. That's fair.
But yeah, absolutely. I think that it's a great movie. I think that it's an amazing technological advance in filmmaking. And I think that as long as you are of a certain age, that you should absolutely watch this movie.
I feel like if you're watching a movie to strictly just be entertained, I think there's better ones to just watch to have an entertainment evening filled with entertainment. But if you want something that's going to maybe not motivate you, but just challenge you ethically, kind of make you provoke thought, I think it's a great movie. Yeah, definitely use discretion. We'll get into the rating here in a second, but like, it's not for everyone, but there's a lot of value in this, and I would definitely recommend it to the appropriate audience.
If you had asked me this question at the beginning of the episode, I would have said no.
Okay.
I think now I would recommend it. If you've never seen this before, I would recommend it to you, and I would say in the recommendation, while you're watching, Upham represents U.S. involvement in World War II, and Ryan represents U.S. civilians after World War II. And I think that context is very powerful to the movie. I think it's worth it for communicating those messages. I think a lot of Americans are pretty naive about U.S. involvement in World War II. Like, as you pointed out, not protecting the Jews early on. As I mentioned earlier, we turned away a boat full of Jewish people trying to escape Nazi-controlled Germany and Nazi-controlled Poland as well. And that's largely why we took on so many Jewish refugees after World War II is a national guilt on the matter. The earn it part I really struggle with. You'll hear, especially not Christian nationalists, people who are nationalists and who are Christians. So they're very patriotic and they're Christians. You'll hear them say things like, Jesus died for your sins, soldiers died for your freedom. That is a slogan that I really don't resonate with. But
is it untrue?
I think so.
Jesus didn't die for our sins. And soldiers didn't die for our freedom.
I don't think that soldiers enlisting, I don't think that was what was on their mind.
Okay.
And as Connor has pointed out, what more than anything was on their mind is like, wrap up this war so we can get home. I don't think it's like we're doing this for the freedom of. And of course, almost certainly there were men that was their entire motivation, but I don't think that was true of the.
But except for people that were conscripted, I can't imagine there weren't people.
Yeah,
correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, unless you're drafted or conscripted, people that enlist in the military go in with that expected potential of like, I may see battle. So like,
true,
they have to have they have to have a motivation, right?
But there are different reasons why people join.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's true.
Their
motivation isn't they're not joining the military just so they can join the military and then say I want to go home. Like,
no,
they're not joining.
There are people that join, and Connor, I know you've said this. I think you said this on recording with our last episode. There are people that enlisted so that they could kill legally. There's people that enlist so that they can make things blow up. Like, not every.
A lot of people enlist because they get free college afterwards.
Yeah,
I mean, there's all kinds of incentives, but there are also a lot of people that do it because they have that sense of patriotism.
Yes. I'm not saying that those people don't exist. I'm saying that they are, I think, likely the minority, and that. Also, I also get squirrely when people conflate Jesus with soldiers for a host of other like doctrinal reasons.
Well, mainly Jesus never wore camo.
So
you don't know that.
That's true. First, we don't know that. Secondly, the robes of the day looked very sand colored. So, you don't know that. So yeah, the earn it line. I struggle with that a little bit, but I do agree that that's what Spielberg was trying to communicate there, and I think that that's worth knowing going in. And you can tell somebody, hey, know these two things. Know that Upham represents U.S. involvement. Know that Ryan represents U.S. civilian after, and you don't have to. And that doesn't spoil the movie, I don't think.
Well,
like while you're watching it, you'll make those connections that you might not otherwise.
I was saying like. People now know that there's an actual Private Ryan in the movie, so that kind of spoils the movie.
Real quick, I forgot to mention this, but I want to get your take on it.
Okay.
What do you think about the fact that when you see, especially the D-Day, invasion, and then the guys who die later in the movie, the Americans are the ones who are generally suffering when they die, right? You see people who have limbs blown off. The medic, when he gets shot, he's bleeding from his abdomen, but he's still able to give his last words. I forget what his name is, but the Jewish guy who's fighting and then he gets stabbed at the end, right? He's struggling to survive. But whenever
Milish is his name.
That's it. Whenever you see the German soldiers, they get shot, they die almost instantly.
Yeah.
They fall down. There's the one where they unload into when Paul Giamatti sits down and the wall falls down and then they shoot everybody in that room or whatever. They all die pretty fast.
Yep.
So there's not a lot of suffering on that side.
Yeah.
But the American side, there's all kinds of suffering.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about that?
So I think partly it's to make the audience sympathize more with the American soldiers than the German soldiers. That's partly because the German soldiers were the bad guys, and it's important to protect that narrative for.
But were they?
Well, no.
The soldiers themselves, I'm not sure.
I'll get that. I'll get to that. It's important to protect the narrative that they are all the bad guys, they're monsters, etc. And that's because it is not the natural state of man to kill other men. And you have to condition soldiers that they are monsters. This goes back to when we were doing Braveheart and we talked about prima nocta, a thing that never actually was instituted, but so many countries said they do it, right? You have to make the other side absolute monsters to justify what you're about to do to them. And I think that whether it's Spielberg's biases or whether it was a creative decision to protect that narrative, you have to keep these people as not human, not the same as us. You have to make them other.
Okay.
That's what I would say on that.
I was just curious on how you felt.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with what you were saying, which is like a lot of German soldiers were conscripted. A lot of...
not even just that they were conscripted. A lot of them were just, they were answering the call of the fatherland without realizing what Germany...
without having the whole context. Yeah, they were propagandized just like...
Is Germany one of the countries that requires the people to serve a specific amount? Like, is that one of the countries that requires military...
It didn't at the time, I don't think.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't believe so.
I know there are countries that require.
Yeah, Israel's one of the big ones right now.
Okay, that military, BTS, like the K-pop.
Yeah.
Korea also requires men up to a certain age to serve for so many years.
Both North and South
before they achieve a certain age. So I just didn't know if Germany was one of those.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just.
Yeah, so that's how I would answer that. I think it's to protect that narrative of all of these people were by very nature evil. I think not giving the Czech people subtitles is like, if you want to know that they were Czech and not German, like that requires effort from you as the audience. So like it easily gets buried by the movie. I think that there is a bit of editorializing when it comes to World War II. So.
Okay.
And that's not to say that is not a defense of anything that was done by the Germans in World War II. Just that.
So what you're saying is, when it comes to World War II, you lean with the Nazis.
Yeah, Hitler's just this guy, No, like what Germany did in what the German state did in World War II is absolutely indefensible. Many of the soldiers were propagandized into fighting for and believed themselves to be just as morally right as the Americans landing on D-Day, and that is a tragic truth of the matter as well. Same thing with any other given war. The people fighting on both sides, except for the conscripted, who don't have a choice, they see this as absolutely vital. So
didn't mean to hijack your wrap-up questions. I was curious.
No,
we're going to edit that all out anyway.
Yeah. That was just for us.
No. By all means, interrupt at any time. The second question here, I think, is a quick one. Quick one to answer. Would you guys change the rating? It's currently rated R.
I wouldn't change it, and I think if it were made today, it would probably be R or.
It's not a thing.
rating,
Yeah.
man.
Okay.
Like, I mean, like, the foobar joke is a fun running gag, but that the F word only shows up in this movie like a couple times.
It's hard because of the violence.
Yeah, it's gore. It's
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, I think that if this movie were made today, the language in the movie would much better reflect the language that soldiers use.
Yeah, probably. But I wouldn't change the rating at all.
No, I wouldn't.
This movie came out in 1998. Has it aged well?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd say too, like a lot. I mean, very little, if any, CGI.
I don't think any.
I think it was all practical effects. Real shooting, real people, and stuff like.
They really cut off Bryan Cranston's arm.
They did. One of the new scenes that I realized I'd never seen before with the D-Day opening. When you see the guy lose a limb, and then it's off in the distance, and he picks up his arm and he just kind of walks off with it.
Oh, I missed that.
Like it wasn't the focus point.
Yeah.
But like it just he got blown off, and then he picks up and he just walks off. He picked up a limb.
Shell shock.
Yeah,
Total.
I'm just like.
There's all kinds of things like that in the background. If you ever rewatch
Yeah.
it, just pay attention.
There's so many
Don't pay
details.
attention to the foreground. Pay attention to the background. There's all kinds of things like that.
I think it's aged well in the fact that like it feels like, despite the inaccuracies, most of which I would not have picked up on because I'm not a World War II buff, I felt like I got a glimpse. Whether it was the cinematography, whether it was just the setting, I feel like the movie, the way it stands right now, gave me a glimpse of being in there in that moment.
Jumping back again away from the rapid questions, Connor, I know that you and I have together experienced a situation where we both went into shock. Have you experienced in the military any situations that would be comparable to shock? And do you think that the way shell shock was portrayed with Captain Miller in the final few minutes of the movie, do you think that that's an accurate portrayal of shell shock or shock?
Yeah, I think so.
Or Shock Top.
Shock Top.
The beer.
I think the most comparable experience for me was my first casualty that I ever saw.
Yeah.
Guy who had
really bad hangnail.
No, he came down on a jump and hit a truck, and I saw both of his tib fibs come through his legs, and we had to run over and help him because that's our job. But I was almost frozen for a minute where I was like, my mind went blank. I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, this is insane. And then eventually your training kicks in and you're able to overcome that, which is what happens with Captain Miller too. But yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I can remember the experience of shock, and I don't remember it like that, but I like it. Yeah.
Well, it's a little different when explosions and bullets are flying past you.
Sure. The way that like all senses kind of drop away except for vision, I do remember that.
Yeah.
Like I remember, I know that I was being asked questions by an EMS guy, and like.
For context, this was a car accident that we were both involved in.
Yeah, and I remember I know that I was spoken to by an EMS person. I'm pretty sure I answered their questions. I don't remember any of that, but I remember everything that I saw while being asked.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a bizarre.
I don't remember any of it. So
yeah, you weren't there.
It feels like I wasn't there for sure. I don't recall any of it.
It's almost like a bizarre dream. Is the best way to describe it.
I've not even dreamed about it. So. I get that. For us all to have experienced this,
All right, keep us going. What's the next?
Last question here. Would this movie be in your personal top 250?
I'm interested to see what Nelson says.
It wouldn't be.
No, I want you to rank your movies.
I really ought to.
I need you to start ranking these because we're inevitably going to reach 250, and then you and I can actually start validly answering this question.
I should start.
But okay, Nelson, you're saying you don't think it would be, Connor?
Yes, 100%.
I think it would be in mine as well. It's not my favorite military movie. It is my favorite military movie of which we've talked about. Okay.
I would put Paths of Glory above this.
American military movie. Okay. Dunkirk, 1917.
I can't.
I can think of multiple movies that would be above Saving Private Ryan, but I do think if I had to list 250 movies, Saving Private Ryan would be on there.
I agree with you. There's movies that I have that would be above this one as well.
Yeah.
But as somebody who is very into World War II history,
Yeah.
this is 100% a movie that I would put into my top 250.
And
Not top 10, but top
Right.
250.
the acting was great. Like, I mean, like it just is cinematically, it's great. Historically, it does give you a feel for what they went through as much as you can on screen. Yeah, I've got no qualms with the movie. And that's the final question.
But on the topic of war movies, join us next week
Well,
for a movie that may or may not be a war movie. I've not seen it before, but I believe it is. Doctor Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb.
and as we've recorded this episode sort of out of order,
Yeah.
we couldn't lose the opportunity of being able to talk to you again, Connor. So we did kind of do this out of order. So that's it.
That's it. Okay, bye.
Connor, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
As always, it's wonderful having you on this show.
Come back anytime.
We don't need to pigeonhole you for military movies. If there's a non-military movie, I think we owe you a non-military movie.
Look, if you want me back for Back to the Future, let me know.
I don't.
I'll have to ask my mom. But
Can't. Mom said no.
Mom said no. Okay, like, but yeah, I don't want to think that you're just army. Like, we would love to have your perspective on non-military if you're interested. But you are a great guest. We appreciate having you. It's always a great conversation. So thank you for being at the table again with us today. I really enjoy. I was looking forward to this conversation.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Okay, bye.
Toodles. Thanks for listening. We had a great time putting this together for you.
To join the conversation, find us on Facebook and Instagram at Silver Screen Biases.
And on Twitter at Screen Biases.
We believe in value for value, so if you found value in our show, we ask you to consider supporting us.
Links to our social media and support can be found in the show notes.